We had been married for 9 years after a year of dating. Thaddeus Vance was the most prestigious neurosurgeon in the United States. He suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder and extreme mysophobia. The Mont Blanc fountain pen he used had never, not even once, been moved from its exact spot on his desk. Ainsley Sterling called her personal attorney. "Attorney Thorne, I believe I'm going to need you to initiate a divorce filing. Please prepare the paperwork." Ainsley and Thaddeus had eloped in Nevada, and under New York's no-fault divorce laws, she could easily file for dissolution due to irreconcilable differences. "Miss Sterling, to file the paperwork, we just need to finalize a few details regarding before Attorney Thorne could finish." Ainsley cut him off. "My husband has been unfaithful." "Understood, ma'am." "I'll prepare it immediately," the lawyer responded briskly, hanging up. Ainsley turned to the associate at the Audemars Piguet boutique on Fifth Avenue with a polite smile. "Excuse me, it seems I won't be needing this watch anymore. Could you recommend something suitable for an older gentleman?" Originally, Ainsley was going to buy Thaddeus a limited edition Royal Oak. He was an extremely punctual man. He was supposed to be home tonight by 9 p.m., but an issue with a medical supplier had disrupted his schedule. None of that mattered anymore. Ainsley ended up buying a much more expensive, customized astronomical chronograph for her late father's memorial. As she walked out of the luxury department store carrying the shopping bag, she received a call from Thaddeus. His voice, as always, was composed. "An emergency surgery came up. I won't be able to come home today or tomorrow." "All right," Ainsley's voice was like a calm sea. "I left some artisanal chicken bone broth with a splash of sherry on the stove. Make sure to have it when you get back." "I will," Thaddeus promised. Hearing his words, Ainsley was lost in thought for a moment. Thaddeus Vance, the youngest chief of neurosurgery in the country, was a man who would personally cook for her. Thaddeus loved her, but love must be unique, exclusive. And when Thaddeus still harbored another woman in his heart, that love had become corrupted. "Ainsley," he asked, surprised by her silence. Ainsley snapped back to reality. "All right, hurry back to the hospital." Only then did Thaddeus hang up. Ainsley got into the waiting Maybach and instructed her executive assistant Blythe to prep the private jet. She flew back to New York City as fast as possible. 13 hours later, arriving at her Tribeca penthouse, her midnight suspicions were confirmed. The door unlocked before she could even punch in her code. Standing inside was Serena Croft, Thaddeus's high school sweetheart and first love. With her wavy burgundy hair, she wore a silk slip. Seeing Ainsley, she smiled charmingly. "Ainsley, you're back. Don't get the wrong idea. I twisted my ankle yesterday, and Thad was just helping me." Without changing her expression, Ainsley asked, "Since when have you been staying here?" "For about 2 weeks. Thad told me the guest room was free. I just moved back to the States and was too lazy to apartment hunt." Serena purposely left the sentence hanging. She wanted to see Ainsley angry hurt. As a woman, Ainsley knew exactly what she was trying to do. She simply nodded. "Ah, I see." Walking past her, Ainsley offered a gentle piece of advice. "Still, Serena, it would be best if you looked for a place soon. You can't stay here forever." Back in the master bedroom upstairs, an indescribable bitterness filled Ainsley's eyes. A moment ago, she had seen a silver ring hanging from a chain around Serena's neck. Thaddeus had an identical one. Ainsley had seen it in a drawer in his study. Passing by the kitchen, the broth on the stove was still simmering. Ainsley had a delicate stomach, and Thaddeus, being a doctor, had managed her diet for years. But now she had no appetite. At dawn, Thaddeus, having finished his surgery earlier than expected, returned home. He was surprised to find Ainsley sitting alone, wide awake. "Ainsley, you're not sleeping!" She looked at him in silence. White dress shirt, black slacks. The simplest combination highlighted his distinguished aura. "I wasn't tired," she replied. Thaddeus reached out and touched her forehead. Only after confirming her temperature was normal did he sigh in relief. "It's cold. Be careful not to catch a chill." After saying this, he headed straight to the bathroom. Thaddeus was a severe germaphobe. After a surgery, he would sanitize himself completely. After touching anyone, even his wife, he would wash his hands or take a shower. Yet this time, he was out in less than 10 minutes, rushing out in his bathrobe with his cell phone in hand. Ainsley Serena fell downstairs. "I'm going to see what happened." Before Ainsley could respond, Thaddeus was already striding toward the door. When she followed, she saw him holding Serena in his arms, his face a portrait of pure anguish. In that instant, Ainsley realized Thaddeus's mysophobia didn't apply to everyone. Serena was his exception. The ambulance from St. Jude Medical Institute arrived quickly, and the paramedics placed Serena on a stretcher. Ainsley handed a long overcoat to Thaddeus, who was still just in his robe. He seemed to realize his slip-up, a hint of shame flashing across his face. Ainsley, don't misunderstand. Serena is just a friend. Before Ainsley could speak, a paramedic approached. Is there a family member for the patient? Someone needs to ride with us to the hospital. I will, Thaddeus replied without hesitation. I'm her legal guardian's friend. Catching his lapse, he corrected himself. I'm her friend. I'll go with her. He glanced sideways at Ainsley and climbed into the ambulance. The vehicle sped away, leaving Ainsley standing alone, wrapped in a tangled web of emotions. She had always believed Thaddeus truly loved her. Despite his misophobia, he had never rejected her. Despite his packed schedule, he made time to cook for her. He was ice-cold to everyone else but tender with her. Yet, in front of Serena, all of that seemed to vanish. The next morning at the Sterling Group headquarters in Manhattan, Miss Sterling, the divorce proceedings with Dr. Vance have begun. The relevant documents have been filed with the New York Supreme Court Attorney Thorne reported clearly. Ainsley, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, stared distractedly out the floor-to-ceiling window. How do you plan to handle the division of assets? The lawyer continued. Ainsley snapped back, gently massaging her temples. I'll keep the Tribeca penthouse. The rest of the marital assets will be split down the middle as per state law. That penthouse was the first property she had bought with her own money after becoming independent. After her father's death from cancer, it had become her only true sanctuary. She couldn't give it to Thaddeus. Ma'am, given the clear evidence of the other party's infidelity, we could push for a much more aggressive settlement. Leave him with almost nothing, Thorne suggested. Ainsley smiled bitterly. There's no need. Split the liquid assets in half. Consider it payment for saving my life. 10 years ago, Ainsley had been in critical condition after a severe car accident orchestrated by a corporate rival. Despite opposition from other senior surgeons, Thaddeus insisted on operating saving her life. Therefore, giving him half was only fair. Thorne didn't press the issue. The final divorce decree will be processed soon. Where should we send it? To Street. Jude Medical Institute. It was the place Thaddeus spent the most time. Ainsley added, the Sterling Group is expanding its North American market and will be relocating its headquarters to Seattle. Therefore, post-divorce, we will suspend all financial backing to Street. Jude's. Charitable funds, state-of-the-art medical equipment, research labs, all of that backing had been Ainsley's quiet favoritism toward Thaddeus. But now that they were parting ways, there should be no more ties. Understood. Thorne nodded. And the watch I purchased the other day, please have it brought to my office. Thank you. Also book me a flight to Seattle for a week from now. And lastly, Ainsley instructed, I want this divorce kept entirely out of the press so it doesn't negatively impact the company. Thorne nodded. Only then did Ainsley stand up and head to the private elevator. She was going to visit Serena. She wanted to see what was so special about the woman Thaddeus couldn't forget. At Street Jude Medical Institute, the moment Ainsley approached the nurse's station, she heard the whispers. That woman with Dr. Vance must be his wife. They make such a gorgeous couple. I know, right? The doctor was personally giving her water and administering her meds. His wife must be so lucky. Ainsley approached expressionlessly and tapped gently on the counter. Excuse me, could you tell me which room Miss Serena Croft is in? The nurse, impressed by Ainsley's elegant, chic appearance and oversized designer sunglasses, hurriedly checked the registry. Miss Croft is in VIP Suite 1218. Would you like an escort? No, thank you. As Ainsley walked away, the nurse muttered to her colleague, Wait, 1218 is Dr. Vance's wife's room. Who is this woman? Hearing that, a shadow of melancholy crossed Ainsley's eyes. Very few people in the U.S. medical community knew her true identity as his wife, as she had intentionally kept a low profile to protect his pride. But it didn't matter anymore. The title of Mrs. Vance would soon have a new owner. Ainsley reached VIP Suite 1218. Before opening the door, she looked through the glass pane and saw Thaddeus and Serena embracing. Thad, if I hadn't gone abroad back then, would I be your real wife right now? Serena asked, her eyes red, leaning against his shoulder. For some reason, Ainsley's heart clenched. She wanted to know the answer, but dreaded hearing it. Then she heard Thaddeus reply, Yes. The sword of Damocles hanging over Ainsley's head finally fell. She knocked on the door, and after receiving permission, opened it slowly. As both their gazes landed on her, she maintained a polite smile. Miss Croft, are you feeling better? Ainsley offered the fruit basket she had brought. Serena accepted it. Thank you, I'm fine. Thad just worries too much. Thaddeus tried to explain himself. Ainsley, Serena's condition was unstable yesterday, so I stayed at the hospital with her. Don't misunderstand. I know. Ainsley nodded. Don't worry. She had always been this understanding. But today, to Thaddeus, her words sounded strangely hollow. From the bed, Serena spoke up again. Ainsley Thad has been like this since high school. He seems cold, but he's a softie on the inside. Don't worry, as soon as I recover, I'll move out of your house. I won't bother Thad anymore. Her words were a subtle flex of her long, intimate history with Thaddeus, all while playing the victim. Ainsley played along. With my work and Thaddeus being so busy at the hospital, it's true we don't have the time to properly care for you. That's why I've hired a private nurse and rented a luxury apartment right near the hospital. It will be much more comfortable for your recovery. Just as she finished speaking, 2 private nurses walked into the room carrying Serena's luggage. Serena's face hardened. She shot a pleading look at Thaddeus. Perhaps Thaddeus also thought it was inappropriate to keep his first love in his marital home because he didn't object. Serena Ainsley is right. A dedicated nurse will be more professional than us. Serena said nothing more. At that moment, Thaddeus checked his watch. I have another surgery. Head home first, Ainsley. Don't wait up. All right, Ainsley agreed. Thaddeus left and the nurses got to work. Only Ainsley and Serena remained in the room. Serena dropped the sweet act and glared at her with arrogance. Do you think I don't know? You only approached Thad for his money. If it weren't for him, how could you afford to live in Tribeca? She scoffed. A materialistic woman like you doesn't deserve him. But don't worry when you guys divorce. I'll make sure he gives you a nice alimony payout. Ainsley found it almost comical. I see Dr. Vance hasn't told you who I am, Serena replied disdainfully. What does it matter who you are? Thad doesn't love you. He's only with you to distract himself from the pain of losing me, forcing himself to love someone else. If it hadn't been you, he would have married literally anyone else. Then I hope your dream comes true, Ainsley replied ambiguously, turning on her heel to leave. Downstairs, she got into her waiting car. She looked up at St. Jude Medical Institute. It was probably the last time she would ever be here. Goodbye, and may we never cross paths again. In the dead of night, Thaddeus still hadn't returned home. Ainsley sent him a text. Did your surgery end? When are you coming home? Surprisingly, a reply came immediately. The surgery ended a while ago. He's exhausted and fell asleep right next to me. Don't interrupt us. The tone was unmistakably Serena's. Ainsley's hand trembled, nearly dropping her phone. She realized that Thaddeus's true home was wherever Serena was. Ainsley's gaze landed on the wedding portrait hanging in the center of the bedroom, taken at a private estate in the Hamptons. She was 21 then. Her father hadn't died of cancer yet. With his last bit of strength, he had placed Ainsley's hand in Thaddeus's. Please take care of her, cherish her, and make my daughter happy. Let her live a joyous life. That was his dying wish to his son-in-law. And Thaddeus had sworn, I will love Ainsley for the rest of my life and treat her well always. But he had broken his promise. Perhaps love was fickle by nature, and the word forever was just a decorative ornament. Ainsley looked at Serena's text again and typed a new message. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my father's passing. I have something to tell you. After sending it, she powered off her phone. She tossed and turned that night, unable to sleep. The next morning at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, the sky was overcast and a fine drizzle was falling. Her father used to love wine. Ainsley had arranged for several cases of vintage Pinot Noir and champagne to be brought to the headstone. She poured the contents of a bottle onto the grass. Dad, he lied to me. He has always loved someone else. I haven't been happy all these years. In front of the person who had loved her most, her voice finally broke. But only the sound of the rain answered her. Some time passed. A clear umbrella suddenly blocked the cold raindrops, turning around. Ainsley saw Thaddeus impeccable in a tailored black suit. His amber eyes were full of concern. He gently stroked her cheek. Ainsley, why are you crying? The tips of his fingers were warm. He seemed completely oblivious to the fact that he had touched her wet cheek without sanitizing his hands first. Ainsley noticed a long strand of burgundy hair on the lapel of his suit. She took a step back and gently pushed his hand away. It's nothing. I just missed my dad. Thaddeus's voice was soft. Don't be sad. Your father is watching over you from heaven, and I will always be by your side. Looking at her red eyes, he asked, What did you want to tell me over text? Ainsley was going to bring up the divorce, but the words died on her tongue. She changed the subject. Your birthday is in 5 days. I've prepared a gift for you. Before she could finish, Thaddeus's phone rang. Pulling it out, Serena's name flashed across the screen. He frowned and hung up, but Serena immediately called back relentlessly. The ringtone echoed through the quiet cemetery. As Thaddeus went to power off his phone, Ainsley spoke. Answer it. Maybe it's urgent. Saying this, she stepped out from under his umbrella. A bodyguard waiting nearby immediately opened one for her. Only then did Thaddeus answer. Serena's pitiful voice drifted out. "Thad, I'm all alone in the apartment and I'm so scared." Hesitation filled Thaddeus's eyes. Ainsley said calmly, "If you're that worried, go." Hearing this, Thaddeus sighed in relief. "I'll come home tonight to be with you." "All right," Ainsley nodded. Thaddeus turned and walked away briskly. Ainsley watched his back until he disappeared into the mist. She turned back to her father's headstone and whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry. I chose the wrong person. I didn't know how to make myself happy. I'm ashamed to even look at you." Only the wind and rain replied, returning home. Ainsley felt her temperature rising. Her concierge doctor made an emergency house call and prescribed antipyretics, but in the dead of night, the fever spiked again. She reached out to the other side of the bed, but it was cold and empty. Thaddeus had broken his promise. He hadn't come home. Ainsley opened her message thread with him. She saw a text from 3 hours ago. "I'm sorry, Ainsley. Serena is very emotionally unstable. I think I'll have to stay with her tonight." It was the first time he had ever apologized to Ainsley because of another woman. Ainsley looked at the wedding photo on the nightstand. In it, both were smiling, but it seemed only she was genuinely happy. "Okay," Ainsley replied. "A heart doesn't turn cold in an instant. The true farewell always arrives in silence." At 9:30 a.m., Thaddeus arrived home punctually with breakfast. "Ainsley," he called out of habit, but there was no response. He bit his lip, took off his coat, thoroughly sanitized his hands, and carefully entered the bedroom. Seeing Ainsley in bed, he sighed in relief without realizing it. He sat on the edge of the mattress and noticed a half-empty blister pack of pills. At that moment, Ainsley opened her eyes. "You're home! Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" Worry filled his eyes. Ainsley replied calmly, "Just a mild cold. I'm fine now." Besides, would Thaddeus have left Serena to come to her side if she had told him no? She didn't want to humiliate herself. Thaddeus didn't press further. He noticed the nightstand was bare. "Where is our wedding photo?" He was highly sensitive to the exact placement of every object in the house. It was fading a bit. "I sent it out to be restored," Ainsley improvised. She knew Thaddeus wouldn't care enough to verify. As expected, he just nodded. "I brought breakfast. All your favorites." "Thank you," Ainsley replied courteously. When she came out of the bathroom, the breakfast she used to love was plated on the dining table. Smoked salmon bagels, the bread toasted perfectly high-end cream cheese, and freshly squeezed orange juice. For 10 years, Thaddeus had remembered all her preferences. Ainsley was lost in thought for a moment. If Serena didn't exist in Thaddeus's heart, this life would have been truly happy. But there are no ifs in this world. "Thad, if you have time today, let's go for a walk," Ainsley proposed suddenly. Thaddeus didn't hesitate. "Sure." After breakfast, Ainsley watched Thaddeus change his clothes and methodically sanitize his hands, feeling a pang of bitterness. "Thad, today will be our final goodbye." Without a chauffeur or security detail, they took a cab to the New York Aquarium. Colorful tropical fish swam in schools inside massive tanks. In fact, Thaddeus and Ainsley had once owned betta fish, but as novices, they didn't know they had to be kept in separate bowls. Otherwise, they would fight until they injured each other. At that moment, an aquarium guide approached them enthusiastically. "Sir, ma'am, what do you think of the butterfly fish? They are monogamous. If one dies, the other never seeks another mate. It's a very beautiful symbolism." Why was fidelity considered such a grand symbolism? It should be the bare minimum. Yet, for some reason, Ainsley suddenly asked, "Dr. Vance, if I died, what would you do?" Hearing the question, Thaddeus frowned and reprimanded her strictly. "Don't say such ominous things." Then, with a dead serious expression, he added, "If you leave this world, it wouldn't take long for me to follow you." Ainsley froze. Thaddeus's tone was undoubtedly firm, but that couldn't hide the fact that his heart harbored love for another woman. In the end, Ainsley bought a pair of butterfly fish and a small, elegant desktop tank. "Thad, how about we put this in your office?" she suggested. "I want you to think of me every time you see them. I'll be leaving your side soon too." "No problem," Thaddeus agreed immediately, entirely missing her double meaning. On their way back, they surprisingly took the subway. The train car was packed. Thaddeus unexpectedly wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly to shield her from the crowd. It was an unprecedented display of public intimacy initiated by him. But just then, his phone buzzed again. "Ainsley, can you answer it for me?" "It's in my pocket," Thaddeus asked casually. Ainsley realized that by holding her in public, he seemed to have completely forgotten his mysophobia. She pulled his phone out without thinking. It was Serena. "Thad, where are you? I wanted you to be with me." Serena's voice on the other end was sickly, sweet, and flirtatious. Thaddeus looked at Ainsley, momentarily speechless. He felt a wave of embarrassment, and a strange, creeping unease sprouted in his chest. He felt that if he went to Serena today, he would lose Ainsley forever. But Ainsley loved him so much. How could she ever leave him go? Ainsley said considerately. "I'll have the driver pick me up at the next stop." Right then, the automated subway announcement chimed. "Next stop, Utopia Parkway. Last stop on this train." For some reason, they both fell silent. The train rolled into the final station quietly. "Ainsley, this is the last time. I promise you," Thaddeus consoled her. "All right," Ainsley nodded. As Thaddeus prepared to turn around with the bag holding the butterfly fish, Ainsley's cold hand grabbed his wrist. He was slightly surprised but didn't resist. "What is it?" Ainsley squeezed his hand tighter, then slowly let her fingers interlock with his. She shook her head. "It's nothing. I just suddenly felt that we've gotten too used to each other." "Don't you think?" Thaddeus bit his lip and nodded. "We've been together for 10 years. It's normal to be accustomed to each other." Then from now on, I'll have to make an effort not to be so used to you." After all, in just 4 days, she would completely disappear from Thaddeus's world. Ainsley smiled softly and let go of his hand, bit by bit. Thaddeus felt a sudden hollow void in his chest. "Hurry up! Go!" "Don't make her wait too long," Ainsley urged. Thaddeus looked at her deeply, then turned and walked away. Ainsley watched his silhouette until it vanished. She looked up at the sign for Utopia Parkway. Perhaps Thaddeus would never realize that passengers who disembark at the final stop rarely cross paths again. In Thaddeus's life, there would never be a second Ainsley Sterling. 7:30 p.m. The Tribeca penthouse. Ainsley surveyed the home she had shared with Thaddeus for 9 years. Heavy medical textbooks on the shelves, his specific brand of insulated mug on the kitchen island, the potted bamboo on the balcony, his footprints were everywhere. Ainsley walked into the walk-in closet. Thaddeus preferred a minimalist black and white aesthetic. She liked vibrant, striking colors. Their clothes hanging side by side looked harmonious, yet distinctly dissonant, much like the 10 years they had spent deceiving themselves. Exhausted, Ainsley texted her assistant. "Blythe, call a moving company." "Right away, Miss Sterling," Blythe replied promptly. Ainsley then contacted attorney Thorne. "Elias, please transfer the title of my West Village brownstone to Mr. Vance. I've already arranged for his belongings to be moved there." The West Village brownstone was a 15-minute drive from St. Jude Medical Institute. Early in their marriage, Thaddeus had wanted to establish their home there, but his grueling residency hours kept him from house hunting. Ainsley suggested the Tribeca penthouse because it held special meaning to her, and they finally settled there. Last year, Ainsley had secretly bought back a stunning brownstone in the village and completely renovated it. It was meant to be her gift for Thaddeus's 30th birthday, only now she wouldn't be able to celebrate it with him. Not his 30th, nor any birthday after. Watching the movers pack up Thaddeus's belongings, one by one, Ainsley didn't feel the crushing sadness she had anticipated. Falling in love was simple. Falling out of love was too. When the secretary left with the movers, Ainsley reminded her, "Do not tell anyone I am moving to Seattle, nor that I am relocating the corporate headquarters." Blythe nodded seriously. "Understood, ma'am. I will ensure no one at the Sterling Group leaks the information." Once they were gone, the penthouse returned to a deafening silence. It had finally reverted to its original state, a home solely for Ainsley Sterling. Meanwhile, in the surgical wing of St. Jude Medical Institute, Thaddeus sat silently, watching the butterfly fish swim in their sleek glass tank, feeling incredibly restless. He remembered the scene when he had dropped by Serena's apartment earlier. "Thad, did she buy that for you?" Serena had asked sharply from the couch when he carefully set the fish tank down on the counter. "Have you actually fallen in love with that woman?" "Of course not," Thaddeus denied almost instinctively. "It's just habit." Serena reached out to him. "That's a bad habit. You need to fix it." Thaddeus had lightly squeezed Serena's fingertips, adjusted her blanket, and said nothing. Tap. A butterfly fish suddenly bumped against the glass of the tank. The faint sound pulled Thaddeus out of his reverie. He looked at his desk, the pen holder, the file organizer, the fountain pen, all luxury items from Tiffany & Co. The pen holder and the organizer had tiny daisy stickers hidden on the bottom. Ainsley loved daisies. In fact, wherever Thaddeus looked, there were traces of Ainsley. The high-end Herman Miller ergonomic chair retailing for thousands of dollars, the emerald velvet curtains chosen by Ainsley because they were soothing for the eyes after long surgeries. Thaddeus sat frozen. His entire world was already saturated with Ainsley. Like a man possessed, he pulled out his phone and opened his text thread with her. There were no unread messages. He frowned instantly. How is this possible? Ainsley usually texted him throughout the day, sharing little details, or at least asking what time he'd be home. Thaddeus took a photo of the fish tank and sent it as a test. Ainsley, the fish are adapting well. 2 hours passed and Ainsley didn't reply. Thaddeus's heart suddenly sank. Just as he was about to call her, a reply came through. Yes. I hope they live happily ever after. Only then did Thaddeus let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Ainsley, I have several major surgeries to oversee at the hospital lately. I'll be pulling night shifts. Don't wait up. After sending that, a nurse called him and he stepped into a consultation room. He had no idea that at that very moment, Ainsley was already drawing a permanent dividing line between them. The following day at noon, the doorbell rang at the Tribeca penthouse. Ainsley thought it was her lunch delivery, but upon opening the door, she found Serena Croft standing there looking perfectly fine with no trace of a sprained ankle. Miss Croft, what do you want? Obviously, I'm here to tell you to bow out, gracefully. Divorce. That already. Serena crossed her arms and glared. Thaddeus's hesitant reaction yesterday had made her feel a profound sense of crisis. Don't speak. Just listen. Serena dialed Thaddeus's number, put it on speaker, and signaled Ainsley to keep quiet. Thad, it's me. I want to ask you something, and you have to answer me honestly. Okay, came Thaddeus's gentle voice over the line. Do you truly love Ainsley Sterling? Serena demanded. Ainsley held her breath for a fraction of a second. Thaddeus remained silent for a long moment before answering. Serena, I've been with her for 10 years. I've just gotten used to having her by my side. So it's just habit, not love, right? Serena pressed. Right, Thaddeus finally replied. Hearing that answer, both Ainsley and Serena smiled. Ainsley's smile was tinged with profound bitterness. She realized she had wasted 10 years of her life on an unrequited illusion. Serena's smile was full of mockery, thinking Ainsley had been too overconfident. For 2 days, Thaddeus genuinely did not come home. To the sparse messages he sent between his hospital duties, Ainsley always replied with brief, polite responses. When love reaches its end, it is irreversible. It's better to let go and become strangers once more. Ainsley sat by the floor-to-ceiling window of her living room, lost in thought. She would leave for Seattle tomorrow. Thaddeus hadn't come home, nor had he sent any more messages. Suddenly, a fountain pen sitting on a side table caught her eye. It was Thaddeus's favorite Mont Blanc, the very one that had inadvertently triggered her decision to leave. It must have fallen out by mistake during the packing process. Since they had decided to separate, she should return it to its owner. Ainsley stood up and headed to the underground garage. 30 minutes later, she arrived at St. Jude Medical Institute. Before reaching Thaddeus's office, Ainsley overheard a couple of patients chatting in the hallway. Apparently, Dr. Vance only drops his germophobia for his wife. With her, anything goes. Yeah, I saw it too. I wonder what they're like when they're alone. First the nurses, now the patients. Everyone was mistaking Serena for Thaddeus's wife. Hearing these words, Ainsley reached the door of Thaddeus's office, only to be informed by a passing resident. Dr. Vance took a personal day today. He's not in. Ah, I see. Thank you, she nodded. She then headed to Serena's VIP room. If he was on leave and not at home, he was surely with her. But the room was impeccably clean and completely empty. Excuse me, has Miss Croft been discharged? Ainsley asked a nurse. The nurse nodded. Yes. Dr. Vance processed her discharge this morning and took her home himself. Hearing this, Ainsley gripped the pen tightly in her pocket. She knew the luxury apartment she had prepared for Serena was currently empty, and the private nurse had been dismissed. Ainsley pulled out her phone and called Thaddeus. Serena answered. Thad is with me. He's not coming back. After his birthday tomorrow, we're going to file for divorce, Ainsley asked calmly. Is that his decision or yours? On the other end, Serena laughed disdainfully. Obviously, it's Thad's. With that, the call abruptly disconnected. Ainsley stared at her phone. Unable to hide her disappointment, she sighed, looking at the pen. In the end, she couldn't even return it to him in person. It was pitch black outside, 9:43 p.m. For the first time in 10 years, Thaddeus was spending the night somewhere other than his own home. He had always believed that any place other than the hospital or his penthouse was swarming with germs. Whenever he went somewhere new, he had to sanitize his surroundings obsessively, which was why he hated staying out. But with Serena, his mysophobia and OCD seemed to miraculously vanish. Ainsley couldn't help but recall what she had overheard earlier. I wonder what Dr. Vance is like with his wife behind closed doors. He must love her with his entire soul. Ainsley lowered her gaze. She remembered her intimate nights with Thaddeus over the past 10 years. He had always been incredibly cautious, highly regimented, and no matter how late it was, immediately afterward, he always had to meticulously scrub himself clean. Indeed, love and the lack thereof manifest in the smallest of details. 9:02 a.m. Still no sign of Thaddeus. Ainsley slipped the diamond ring off her left ring finger. It featured a flawless center stone surrounded by smaller diamonds. Thaddeus had personally mined the rough diamond during a medical volunteering trip in South Africa years ago. Its purity was astonishing. Ainsley had loved the ring at first sight, much like how she had fallen in love with Thaddeus at first sight. The ring, along with the Mont Blanc pen, was placed into a thick manila envelope. Finally, Ainsley pulled out a piece of heavy cardstock and wrote a single line for Mr. Vance. After finishing, she grabbed her Rimowa suitcase and walked to the front door. She slid the envelope halfway under the threshold. She took out her phone and sent Thaddeus one last text message. "Happy birthday." Then she deleted his contact, removed her SIM card and snapped it in half, replacing it with a new one. Sitting in first class en route to Seattle, Ainsley felt a profound sense of liberation. "Thaddeus, we are now as far apart as the mountains and the sea. May we never meet again." Meanwhile, at Jude Medical Institute, Thaddeus had just rushed back to his office after getting Serena settled into her new place. He barely plugged his phone into the charger when a nurse knocked on his door. "Dr. Vance, you have certified mail." "Thank you." Thaddeus took it. The large envelope had no return address. Intrigued, he tore it open. Inside were several crisp sheets of legal paper. Thaddeus frowned and quickly scanned them. Shockingly, it was a divorce decree. By the authority and power of the Supreme Court of the State of New York, it is hereby ordered that the marriage between the plaintiff Ainsley Sterling and the defendant Thaddeus Vance is dissolved. Thaddeus read every word aloud. The instant he comprehended what it meant, his heart literally skipped a beat. He shot up from his desk and practically ran out of the office, dialing Ainsley's number frantically. "The number you have dialed is currently out of service." He opened his text messages and saw Ainsley's last text. "Happy birthday." "Ainsley, why is your phone off?" He typed back rapidly. Message failed to send. In that moment, entirely disregarding his professional composure, Thaddeus sprinted out of the hospital, hailed a yellow cab, and rushed to the Tribeca penthouse. Passcode incorrect. The mechanical voice of the smart lock was ruthless. Thaddeus dropped his head in sheer frustration and noticed the envelope sticking out from under the door. Tearing it open, the diamond ring and the Mont Blanc pen clattered sharply onto the hallway floor. The heavy cardstock note read, "Give the ring to the person you truly love. We will never meet again." Thaddeus couldn't even hold the lightweight piece of paper steady. His hands shook violently. He didn't want to believe it, but he had to accept it. The Ainsley he knew had always been capable of letting go with absolute decisiveness. He bent down and picked up the ring and the pen. Before his eyes flashed the image from 9 years ago, him kneeling down to propose with that very ring and the scene of their somewhat hasty but grand wedding at a private estate in the Hamptons, where he slipped it onto her left ring finger. That day, countless reporters had swarmed the gates. Ainsley's father was a famous billionaire philanthropist, and Ainsley herself was a rising star in the corporate world. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. "What a power," a couple people whispered. Thaddeus remembered how at the reception, many Wall Street tycoons looked at Ainsley with sheer admiration, then glanced at him. "You're a lucky guy, son. I hear you're just a resident. From now on, Ainsley will be taking care of you." Someone had patted Thaddeus condescendingly on the shoulder. He had frowned, his lips pressed into a thin line, not knowing how to respond. He felt deeply inadequate, as if in the eyes of these billionaires he wasn't worthy of Ainsley Sterling. Fortunately, Ainsley had appeared quickly. Her custom Oscar de la Renta wedding gown was a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, commissioned by her father when she turned 18, taking years to perfect and costing a fortune. "Uncle, don't joke around. Thad is an incredible man. He pulled me back from the brink of death." Ainsley linked her arm through Thaddeus's. Even though she noticed the rigid tension in his body, she kept her brilliant smile. "If it weren't for Dr. Vance, you and my dad would have cried yourselves gray. Ah, on such a joyous day, why bring up such grim things?" "My apologies, Dr. Vance." The middle-aged titan of industry, who a moment ago looked at Thaddeus with subtle disapproval, now smiled fondly at his friend's daughter. "Since you're married now, support each other and do not ever let our Ainsley down." "I won't," Thaddeus had promised with complete sincerity. That day, despite the paparazzi outside, not a single photo of their wedding ever leaked to the press. Ainsley later told Thaddeus, "I know you hate media exposure and value your privacy. So, I bought out the press pool and gave them a hefty bonuses to kill the story. In reality, she had made the problem disappear with pure money. Thaddeus knew that, but he also knew Ainsley was meticulously protecting his feelings. In the beginning, they truly had been happy. But how had they come to this? What made Ainsley pack up and leave without a single warning? Standing in the hallway outside the door of the home they once shared, Thaddeus's mind raced. Was it the old photo with Serena he hadn't hidden well enough? Or a name he muttered in his sleep? But Ainsley had never once mentioned Serena to him. He thought she didn't know. But you can't block out the sun with one finger. His longing for another woman had been completely transparent to his wife. In those moments, did Ainsley think he was a coward, unable to let the past go? How had she endured it? Thaddeus was desperate for the answers. He scrolled through his contacts, found the number for Blythe Ainsley's executive assistant, and called her immediately. "Blythe, please. I need to know where Ainsley is. Just tell me where she went." His voice was practically begging, but Blythe's tone was impeccably professional and icy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. I am not privy to Miss Sterling's personal itinerary. And I must inform you that whether you ask me, her driver, or any executive at the Sterling Group, we will all give you the exact same answer. We don't know." With that, Blythe hung up without hesitation and blocked his number. Previously, several executives at the Sterling Group had maintained polite contact with Thaddeus out of respect for Ainsley. But now that the boss had divorced him, there was absolutely no need to humor him. Thaddeus knew these had to be Ainsley's strict orders. She didn't want him to find her. But he didn't give up. He called the private chauffeur who often drove them only to hear the cold, automated operator. "The number you have dialed is unavailable." He had been blocked across the board. Just as Thaddeus was spiraling into despair, attorney Elias Thorne appeared behind him in the hallway. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. I am the legal representative for Miss Sterling. Since your marital relationship has been formally dissolved, there are some matters regarding the division of marital assets that you need to be briefed on." Thorne smiled a brittle corporate smile. "Shall we speak somewhere more quiet?" Thaddeus nodded mechanically. If he had harbored even a shred of hope that this divorce was a misunderstanding, seeing the high-powered attorney destroyed it completely, Ainsley truly didn't love him anymore. Attorney Thorne led him to a high-end cafe around the corner, adjusted his glasses and got straight to the point. "Mr. Vance, I'll be brief. What was the exact cause of fault my client presented to the court? I imagine you know." A vague thought crossed Thaddeus's mind, but he recalled Ainsley's behavior over the past few days. She hadn't seemed to care at all. In that moment, a horrifying realization hit Thaddeus. Every single time Serena needed him, whether he immediately agreed or hesitated and looked to Ainsley for her opinion, Ainsley had always smiled softly and practically sent her husband off to another woman. No jealousy, no envy. She never even asked who Serena was, not even when Serena brazenly moved into their home. This reaction could only mean two things. First, Ainsley already knew Serena was the first love he couldn't forget. Second, Ainsley had already decided she no longer loved him, or she was utterly, completely disappointed in him. Disappointment piled upon disappointment until she finally chose to walk away. That was why Ainsley's lack of arguments, her gentle understanding, and her terrifying silence over the last week were actually the quiet process of her gradually giving up on him. Thaddeus's face drained of all color. "You committed adultery, did you not?" Thorne stated without an ounce of emotion. His client, Ainsley Sterling, was one of the most brilliant business magnates in the country. She shouldn't have been tied down to a man like this for a decade. Returning to the matter at hand, Mr. Vance. According to Miss Sterling's wishes, with the exception of the Tribeca penthouse, all other liquid marital assets will be divided equally. With this capital, you will be able to live an exceedingly comfortable life. Thorne slid a thick legal binder toward Thaddeus. "By the way, Miss Sterling has gifted you an additional piece of real estate as part of the settlement. It's detailed on the last page. You just need to sign the transfer deed." The property was the West Village brownstone. Thaddeus was stunned for a moment. He remembered that early in their marriage he had mentioned wanting to buy a place right there. "Aside from this, did she leave me anything else?" "Not even a message," Thaddeus asked, his voice choked. "The access code to the West Village property is the date of your 9th wedding anniversary, which also happens to be the exact day she discovered your infidelity." The lawyer stood up his posture, projecting utter disdain. "Honestly, as a legal professional, I shouldn't let my personal feelings interfere. But I can't muster a single ounce of sympathy for the polished, handsome doctor sitting in front of me. Perhaps it's the anger I feel on behalf of another person. 10 years of her youth given to you entirely in vain." Before leaving, Thorne looked down at the devastated Thaddeus and delivered the final blow. Miss, Sterling asked me to wish you a happy birthday. This brownstone and the divorce decree are her final gifts to you. Final. Final. Thaddeus repeated the word in his mind. They had once sworn vows to be together for a lifetime, yet barely into their 9th year. He had committed an irreparable mistake and lost the Ainsley who loved him the most. Thaddeus walked out of the cafe as if his soul had been ripped from his body. He didn't know how others would describe his current state, but he knew he looked pathetic. On a day of brilliant sunshine, he felt a cold that pierced straight through to his bones. There's a saying, the one who truly wants to leave picks a morning of gentle breezes and bright sunshine, puts on their usual coat, quietly closes the door behind them, and vanishes forever. It perfectly described his reality. Thaddeus smiled with deep self-loathing and flagged down a taxi. His destination, the West Village. 9th wedding anniversary. The day, miss. Sterling discovered your infidelity. As he punched the code into the keypad, Thaddeus recalled Attorney Thorne's biting words. He couldn't remember exactly what Serena had done in the house that day, but regardless, he was the one at fault. Opening the heavy oak door, Thaddeus was rendered completely speechless. Everything inside was decorated exactly to his specific minimalist tastes. Walls lined with medical journals, lush indoor plants placed perfectly. On the designer coffee table rested a book he had left half-read at the Tribeca penthouse. A custom metal bookmark shaped like a cat's head peeked out from the pages, a gift Ainsley had bought him years ago. If he didn't know Ainsley was gone, he would have thought this was the home they had lived in together for the past 9 years. Ainsley, I'm so sorry. Touching the cold metal bookmark, he finally couldn't stop his eyes from turning red. But it was far too late. Thad, I'm sorry. I feel like you don't reject me anymore. Have you fallen for me a little? Not just like, but love. But Thad-like isn't love. Two people who don't love each other shouldn't get married. Ainsley's past words echoed in his ears. What had she actually said? Or was this just a hallucination born of his crushing guilt? Arranged neatly on the dining table were the birthday gifts she had given him over the years. Ainsley, happy birthday. Thaddeus had given her pearl earrings, an ambient lamp, a quartz desk clock, and 2 VIP tickets to a John Legend concert. The monetary value of those gifts didn't amount to a fraction of what she had effortlessly bought for him over the years. But Ainsley had always said, Thad, I don't need expensive gifts. I just want your genuine sincerity. Back then, Thaddeus had been sincere. He was sincere when he chose those gifts. He had surrendered his heart to her a long time ago. Happy anniversary. I hope we stay together forever. Thaddeus looked at the preserved roses he had once given Ainsley and remembered his wish from that year. But preserved flowers only last about 3 years. I'm so sorry, Thaddeus whispered into the empty room. Just then, his phone started ringing incessantly. Serena. For the first time, Thaddeus felt a visceral wave of repulsion. He didn't want to answer, but Serena was relentless. She would hang up and immediately call back. Thaddeus finally swiped to answer. Serena, what is it? I'm busy right now. On the other end, Serena paused. It was the first time Thaddeus had ever spoken to her with such ice in his voice. Before she could complain, he continued. Serena, we made a mistake. Or, rather, I made a massive mistake. I should have told you this earlier, but I am a married man. My feelings for Ainsley aren't just habit. It's love. I cannot leave her. Thaddeus was rambling. The situation was already at its absolute worst. The physical distance gave him the courage to finally speak the brutal truth. There should be no further contact between us. What ended back in high school needs to remain in the past. As soon as he finished, Serena panicked. Thad, what are you saying? How can you possibly love someone like Ainsley Sterling? She's just a vain, materialistic gold digger, Serena. Is there some kind of misunderstanding here? Thaddeus sounded genuinely confused. There's no misunderstanding, Thad. I don't know why you're acting like this right now, but don't let her fool you. We are soulmates. You still have me in your heart. We were so happy before. You can't just end things like this. Serena was practically sobbing over the phone, her voice bordering on hysterical. Thaddeus said nothing. After a long silence, he finally spoke. Serena, there are some things better cleared up in person. Okay, Serena agreed instantly. I'll come to the Tribeca penthouse. No. That is Ainsley's home. Not mine, Thaddeus stated factually. What? You let her keep that house, Thad? Why are you so stupid? Giving her a little cash in the divorce would have been enough. Real estate in Tribeca is worth a fortune. Serena's voice abruptly skyrocketed in pitch. Thaddeus frowned deeply. Serena, meet me at the cafe down the street from the hospital. He suspected something foul, but he didn't want to interrogate her over the phone. Some things needed to be witnessed face to face. At the Artisan Cafe near St. Jude Medical Institute, Thaddeus arrived 30 minutes early. It was an old habit of his. Thinking of habits, Thaddeus thought of Ainsley again. Thad, why do you have to be so rigidly punctual about everything? He had answered coldly. I don't like anything escaping my control. In other words, he hated the unknown and the unexpected, even physical contact. Ainsley had blushed slightly and asked shyly, including me, he had given the same cold answer. But the Thaddeus of back then didn't know that Ainsley would become the most beautiful, unknown, and unexpected variable in his life, and that he would fall hopelessly in love with that surprise. Thad, did you wait long? Serena arrived, looking breathless. She was late. Thaddeus raised his wrist to check his watch. This watch was also a gift from Ainsley, a Vacheron Constantin overseas valued at over $100,000. For our brilliant doctor who values time like gold. I'm giving you this so you'll think of me every time you check the hour. Ainsley's bright laughter echoed in his ears. Thad. Serena waved a hand in front of his face. Thaddeus snapped back to reality, bit his lip, and frowned slightly. How did you know Ainsley and I got divorced? It was something he himself had only found out mere hours ago. Serena hadn't expected Thaddeus to be so direct. She hesitated, then gritted her teeth and confessed, I went to see her. I told her to divorce you. You don't love her and she isn't good enough for you. Thaddeus's blood ran cold. It turned out Serena had been behind it all. He couldn't fathom how the girl of his teenage dreams could do something so malicious. He smiled bitterly. You've really misunderstood the situation. Facing Serena's bewildered look, Thaddeus's voice cracked slightly. Ainsley is the one with a net worth in the billions. She is the CEO of the Sterling Group. The penthouse in Tribeca belonged to her from the very beginning. He remembered the comment Serena had made on the phone. What? Serena couldn't process the words. Don't joke around, Thad. I'm dead serious. You know me. I don't lie. Thaddeus's expression was unnervingly serene. How is that possible? How could Ainsley Sterling be the CEO of the Sterling Group? She was just a trophy wife that you financially supported. Serena shook her head in disbelief. Thad, you're messing with me, right? I love you with or without money. I love you, flustered. Serena reached across the table to grab his hand, but he smoothly dodged her grasp. Serena, I am just a doctor. I am not the billionaire you imagined. Impossible. Serena still refused to believe it. She looked Thaddeus up and down. Your watch, your tailored suit, your Italian leather shoes, just what you're wearing is worth tens of thousands of dollars. And all the medical journals call you the most eligible, discreetly wealthy bachelor, the highest paid surgeon, at St. Jude's before returning to the U.S. Serena had done extensive research on her ex-boyfriend. On paper, Thaddeus was the ultimate catch. Handsome, tall, and although he was a surgeon at a private hospital, the wealth he casually displayed was staggering. Serena had read numerous profiles on him. Besides praising his surgical genius, they heavily documented his lifestyle. The watches, the ties, the shoes, the luxury cars he swapped out frequently. Thad, are you angry because I went behind your back to tell Ainsley to divorce you? I know it was wrong, but I did it for your own good. I didn't want to see you suffer tied to someone you don't love. Serena forced tears into her eyes, looking the picture of sincerity. I love Ainsley, Thaddeus stated, his voice ringing with absolute finality. I love her. It's not that I don't love her, he repeated firmly. Serena sat frozen as if struck by lightning. Thad, you. Serena, I am just a doctor at St. Jude's. All of those extraordinary material luxuries you researched, they were all provided by Ainsley. Simply put, for the past 9 years, I have been living entirely off her wealth. Do you understand? Reaching this point, Thaddeus accepted reality with a crushing calmness. He had been the recipient of Ainsley's meticulous care and unconditional financial and emotional support, but his fragile male ego had never allowed him to openly acknowledge it. He looked at Serena serenely. I don't know what your true intentions were when you sought out Ainsley, but the reason I took you in wasn't because I still loved you. It was purely out of bruised pride, out of the lingering resentment that you abandoned me for your ambitions back then. He smiled bitterly. Do you even remember how we started dating? Serena was stunned. Their accidental meeting and subsequent high school romance had been entirely orchestrated by her. How did he know Serena? I have no desire to dig up the past. In fact, I don't care about the past anymore. Thaddeus frowned deeply. What I want to know is what else you've done since you came back. He lowered his gaze. I shouldn't have felt pity for you. I shouldn't have brought you into my home. I shouldn't have entertained nostalgia. All of this is my fault. Thaddeus's gaze sharpened his tone, dropping to a freezing register. Tell me what other lies you've told and exactly what you did to Ainsley. With her carefully constructed fantasy shattered, Serena felt a surge of panic and guilt. She didn't dare look him in the eye. I just advised her to divorce you. I answered a couple of your calls and told her we were sleeping together. Even now, Serena harbored a tiny sliver of hope. Even if all that money belonged to Ainsley post-divorce, Thaddeus would surely receive a massive settlement. It was money someone like Serena could never earn in a lifetime. Besides, Thaddeus was a top-tier surgeon. His base salary was well into the high six figures, not including bonuses. It was more than enough to fund a lavish lifestyle. Thad, I was wrong. But Ainsley doesn't want you anymore, and you're already divorced. Before Serena could finish, Thaddeus cut her off his face. A mask of disgust. He was utterly disappointed. Serena, how could you have changed this much? Are you even the Serena I used to know? Thaddeus's question caused the facade Serena was desperately maintaining to collapse completely. Changed. I have always been like this. And you knew it. Knowing exactly who I am, you still pined for me for 10 years after I left to study abroad. What right do you have to judge me? Serena scoffed loudly. After you got the one that got away, you couldn't forget the elusive white moonlight. Now that the red rose has wised up and dumped you, you call me despicable and shameless, Thaddeus. The truth is, the most cowardly and despicable person here is you. You hurt Ainsley. You didn't know how to appreciate what you had. You greedily wanted to have it all. Serena's screaming left Thaddeus's mind blank. He knew that from any objective standpoint, her vicious words were absolutely correct. Thad, I really misjudged you. I thought you were a self-made millionaire, but in the end, you were just a high-priced boy toy kept by Ainsley Sterling. Listen to me carefully. Give me $1 million in 3 days. If you don't, I'll go to the hospital board and expose everything. Having lost all face, Serena decided to go all in on extortion. She smiled venomously. You wouldn't want the world to know that the esteemed Dr. Vance is garbage who plays with women's feelings and lives a double life, would you? But Thaddeus didn't react. If you want to go to the board, go. I have done everything I possibly can for you. He looked at her coldly, as if she were a total stranger. Then he stood up without hesitation. I was wrong. Ainsley leaving me is already my punishment. If heaven believes that isn't enough, I am fully prepared to endure more. As for you, Serena. Thaddeus looked at her with a trace of genuine pity. You reap what you sow. There are no shortcuts in this world. That was the last piece of advice he ever gave her. Whatever Serena chose to do no longer mattered to him. He only wanted to find Ainsley quickly, beg for her forgiveness, and plead for her mercy, whatever it took. Meanwhile, at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, stepping off the plane, Ainsley was enveloped in a warm hug by her longtime friend and business partner Gideon. He was a charismatic American tech developer with a booming laugh. Ainsley, you finally decided to relocate to Seattle. We are going to make an absolute killing here. Ainsley smiled faintly. Sure. You eat the steak and I get the crumbs. I'm counting on you. What are you talking about, Ainsley? We're founding this new venture together. Now that you're here, obviously it's a 50-over-50 split. Man, it's been brutal running this without you. Gideon played the victim perfectly. Ainsley couldn't help but laugh. All right. I'll have Blythe assign some of our best people to your team, but I can't take 50%. I just moved the entire corporate headquarters here. I'm going to be swamped. God, Ainsley, you made such a massive move behind my back. And what about your husband, that Thaddeus guy? Gideon winked playfully. I divorced him. I'm single now. Saying it aloud, Ainsley felt no sharp pain. When you stop loving someone, it isn't as agonizing as poetry makes it out to be. Some people are like a splinter embedded deep in your palm. Out of fear of the pain, you don't dare pull it out, and over time the wound only festers. Once you finally grit your teeth and extract it, the palm stops throbbing, and the tiny wound slowly heals until it's neither visible nor felt. Ainsley looked up at the overcast Seattle sky. Thaddeus, I don't know if you felt a bit of joy or sorrow when you received that divorce decree. But to me, it doesn't matter anymore. I will no longer rejoice in your happiness nor grieve for your sorrows. I am just me, Ainsley Sterling. Thaddeus, I hope you suffer exactly as I once did. Ainsley, since you're single now, I am absolutely setting you up with some gorgeous guys. Tech bros, real estate moguls, you name it. Gideon linked his arm through hers excitedly. Fine by me, Ainsley agreed. She needed to move forward and naturally meet new people. That night, under the neon lights of downtown Seattle, she drank, sang, and reveled in her newfound freedom. The next morning in the West Village brownstone, Thaddeus tossed and turned, plagued by endless dreams all about Ainsley, both joyous and devastating. The person he used to see the moment he opened his eyes could now only be found in his sleep. Thaddeus had tried contacting every mutual acquaintance he could think of, but they all maintained total silence regarding her whereabouts. Thad, leave her alone. She deserves someone infinitely better. You were never in her league, one former friend had told him mercilessly before hanging up. Massaging his temples, Thaddeus prepared to shower. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was from the hospital. He frowned and answered. A panicked voice rushed through the speaker. Dr. Vance, something terrible has happened. Please come to the hospital immediately. Hearing this, Thaddeus's frown deepened. He showered in record time and drove straight to Street, Jude Medical Institute. Dr. Vance, you're finally here. A nurse he knew well greeted him with a smile that looked more like a grimace. Did a patient's family cause a scene? Thaddeus couldn't help but recall Serena's threat from yesterday. Had she actually come to the hospital to expose him? No, it's not that. The nurse hesitated and shook her head. Then what is it? Thaddeus hated situations where he was the only one kept in the dark, while others beat around the bush. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. You'll understand when you go to the chief of surgery's office. With that, she scurried away. Inside the chief's office, Thaddeus sat rigidly. Are you saying you're firing me across the desk? A steaming cup of coffee sat untouched, but an icy atmosphere permeated the room. Now, Thad, you're a brilliant young man, don't get so defensive. The board just feels you need a rest. It's simply a 6-month mandatory leave of absence. The chief smiled, but his words were laced with undeniable rejection. Thaddeus bit his inner lip. I've never heard of an attending surgeon being forced into a 6-month sabbatical without cause. The chief adjusted his thick glasses. Do you really want me to spell it out for you? He looked at Thaddeus critically. You're young and highly capable, that's true. But St. Jude's is a boutique institute. Someone of your caliber is a bit too expensive for us to maintain on our own. Previously, Miss Sterling was your primary backer. The cutting-edge medical equipment, the specialized pharmaceuticals, the research grants, she funneled it all in. Since the topic was breached, the chief decided to lay all the cards on the table. Thad, to be perfectly honest, you belong in a pure research lab, not dealing with hospital politics. Now that Miss Sterling has abruptly withdrawn all her investments, the board has been breathing down my neck. I can't bankrupt the entire hospital just to keep you on staff, can I? Thaddeus sat in stunned silence. After a long time, he asked, What do you mean about Miss Sterling? The chief sighed heavily. You genuinely didn't know anything. When you were first hired out of residency, Miss Sterling signed a massive collaboration agreement with our institute. Of course, that was just the public front. In reality, she was quietly bankrolling our imported equipment and specialized drugs. The chief paused. She asked for absolutely nothing in return except for one strict condition. Under no circumstances were we to ever let you go. Miss Sterling held you in the highest possible regard. For us, having a star surgeon like you at St. Jude's was an honor, but if we've survived this long, it is entirely thanks to her. The chief took a sip of his coffee and said sincerely, If you get the chance, please thank her on my behalf. Yes, I will, Thaddeus managed to say. He smiled weakly and bit his lip harder, tasting copper. In his heart, he knew there would be no such chance. He couldn't even find her. Thank you, Chief. And thank you to my colleagues for your guidance over these years. Thaddeus stood up and bowed deeply to the older man. He didn't touch his coffee. Walking out of the office, Thaddeus headed straight for his own. He had worked at St. Jude's for 8 years. And for those 8 years, Ainsley had quietly paved every inch of his path. Her love was never boasted about in loud declarations, but it saturated every detail of his professional and personal life. Thaddeus looked around his office. Ainsley doesn't love require a response from the other person. How did you endure all those years of my coldness? But he could only speak to the empty air. The butterfly fish in the glass tank continued to swim freely. They didn't know that the two people who had bought them together were now permanently severed. Can a shattered mirror ever be pieced back together? Who knew? Thaddeus called a premium moving service to pack up his office. Dr. Vance, you'll still be treating patients right. Several patients approached when they heard the commotion. They all seemed deeply reluctant to see him go. Although Thaddeus possessed a cold bedside manner, his surgical outcomes were nothing short of miraculous. Yes, I will, Thaddeus forced a reassuring smile. Don't worry, I will return to the operating room. But first he had to find Ainsley. After expressing his true feelings and begging for her forgiveness, he genuinely needed a rest. He needed to reflect on the monster he had become. Thaddeus retreated to the West Village brownstone and didn't step outside for days. He barely ate, submerging himself in his dreams. He exhausted every possible avenue trying to locate Ainsley, but encountered walls of silence everywhere. It was the first time in his life he felt such absolute paralyzing frustration. He could only sleep to anesthetize the pain. Only in dreams could he meet Ainsley. "Thad, what were you like in high school? I want to see pictures of you as a student." In the dream, Ainsley was curled up in his arms. They were basking in the sunlight on a balcony, flipping through a thick photo album. It contained all the photos they had taken together over 10 years. "Thad, I wish we had met earlier. We would have fallen in love so much faster." Ainsley's eyes sparkled. She looked at him with eyes brimming with adoration. But in the dream, he remained silent, an endless, suffocating silence. Ainsley's gaze gradually darkened, revealing her profound disappointment. "Thad, you never loved me. If you couldn't forget Serena, why did you propose to me?" Her voice turned hysterical and agonizing. "Isn't that right, Thad?" Thaddeus screamed and jolted awake. He was drenched in a cold sweat. Surrounding him was only the chilling emptiness of the brownstone. There was no trace of Ainsley, neither her joy nor her pain. Thaddeus dropped his head, feeling utterly powerless. He felt like he was going insane from the grief, but he knew this wasn't even a fraction of the agony Ainsley had suffered in silence. He had to endure it. Suddenly his phone rang. An unknown number. A spark of desperate hope flared in Thaddeus's chest. Could it be Ainsley? Upon answering, he heard Serena's terrified voice. "Thad, save me." Thaddeus frowned. He couldn't understand why Serena was so relentlessly persistent. He had already deleted all his social media accounts and blocked her number. "Miss Croft, if you are in trouble, you should call 911, not your ex-boyfriend." Thaddeus was certain Serena was pulling her usual manipulative stunts. "No," Serena shrieked. "Thad, only you can save me. They're coming after me. They want to put me in federal prison. They want to kill me." She was rambling incoherently. Thaddeus found it absurd. "Serena, Thad, I know you don't believe me anymore, but this time it's real. If you don't help me, I'll have no choice but to die. If you don't believe me, turn on the news. They've exposed everything." Serena's voice faded as if she were struggling to breathe. Thaddeus opened his laptop and went straight to a major news portal. Breaking news. The Black Widow of high society, a stolen life, finally pays the price. Fake Ivy League degrees exposed. The downfall of Serena Croft, professional grifter. He clicked on a random viral video. Hard evidence had been leaked online by countless angry wives of her former victims. Disgusting text logs, explicit selfies, and even a 10-second dashcam video of an infidelity caught in the act. The more he watched, the more horrifying it became. Thaddeus's expression turned frigid. It turned out the idealized white moonlight he had pined for was actually a monster. Now, even his nostalgic feelings from high school felt utterly contaminated. "Serena. So from beginning to end, I was just another one of your marks. People are like that. They ask questions knowing the brutal answer. As if only by hitting rock bottom can they finally give up completely. I'm sorry, Thad. I know I hurt you guys, but it was the only way I could live like you do," Serena sobbed over the phone. "I don't understand. Why do some people get to be born on third base while I, who finally managed to scrape together some money and status, have to be thrown back to the gutter? I worked so hard, I just wanted the life I deserved," Thaddeus couldn't stomach Serena's twisted logic. "Anymore?" he asked coldly. "Do you truly not realize what you've done wrong? You people born with silver spoons in your mouths don't get it. You were born with privilege. But I had nothing." Serena laughed bitterly. "Did you really have nothing?" Serena Thaddeus asked suddenly. Serena paused. "You were beautiful since you were a child. Your father was a bank manager. You lived in a great neighborhood. In the end, you even got a full scholarship to study abroad. You already had infinitely more than most people. How can you say you had nothing?" Thaddeus listed her advantages. Perhaps that was why he had liked her back in high school. But all of that was in the distant past. Serena had mutated over time until she was unrecognizable. "Thad, sometimes I really envy you." Serena's voice on the phone dripped with sorrow. "Your absolute purity makes me feel the injustice of this world even more. Those advantages you mentioned to me, they were chains. Sins." Serena let out a light, desperate laugh. "Whatever. Right now only you can help me. Please help me one last time." Thaddeus felt for the first time that it was impossible to communicate with her. Perhaps they had never actually been looking in the same direction. "Serena, I cannot help you. Everyone must be held accountable for their actions. Regardless of your intentions, what is wrong is wrong. Thaddeus gripped his phone tightly. Thad. Her voice was a pathetic plea. But this time, Thaddeus didn't soften. If you made a mistake, you must bear the consequences. It was a brutal lesson that both he and Serena desperately needed to learn. Don't keep going down the wrong path. One mistake just leads to another. With that, Thaddeus hung up decisively. The next wave of news about Serena broke 2 days later. Thaddeus had been sending messages every single day to Ainsley's private Instagram account. He always received the same error: user not found or account private. But at that moment, a push notification flashed on his screen. An Ivy League university had formally revoked Serena Croft's master's degree and scrubbed her from their distinguished alumni registry. Immediately following was an apology video posted by Serena. In the video, she looked incredibly haggard. She spoke seemingly from the heart, devoid of makeup, but the public refused to buy it. Serena hadn't destroyed just one family, she had destroyed dozens. Thaddeus powered off his phone. He sat by the window in his living room. Next to him was the round glass tank, and inside, the 2 butterfly fish had grown quite a bit. They still swam together like shadows, utterly devoted. Thaddeus couldn't help but remember the day he bought them with Ainsley. Suddenly he wanted to retrace the steps he had taken with her that day. He wanted to return to the Utopia Parkway subway platform. Meanwhile in Seattle, Ainsley had just wrapped up a massive negotiation. The local tycoons had grossly underestimated her because of her beautiful, unfamiliar face, and especially because she was a woman. But it was precisely this woman, Ainsley Sterling, leading an elite corporate team armed with exhaustive preparation and relentless drive, who finally secured the multi-million-dollar partnership at the negotiating table. It was a prime plot of real estate in downtown Seattle. Ainsley planned to develop a massive luxury apartment complex specifically designed for young American tech entrepreneurs. Miss Sterling, I certainly didn't expect a woman of such delicate appearance to possess such ruthless business acumen. Are all New York women as stunning and fierce as you? An older executive stopped Ainsley, making no effort to hide his admiration. Ainsley smiled faintly. Yes, not just New York women. All American women are like this. When we want something, we get it. Then may I buy you dinner? The conquest in the executive's eyes was too obvious. Ainsley shook her head. I apologize, but as you know, I have my hands full with the new development. With that, she walked away with Blythe. But after a few steps, Ainsley turned back. When these apartments are finished and operational, the first drink is on me. She smiled over her shoulder, radiating the effortless charm of a corporate titan. Not far away, a photographer from a major business journal captured the moment forever. Ainsley returned to her sprawling estate in the Seattle suburbs. Opening the front door, 2 massive dogs bounded toward her, a golden retriever and a fluffy Samoyed. Having her own dogs had always been Ainsley's dream. In the past, due to Thaddeus's severe mysophobia, she had never even dared to mention it. But after securing her freedom, the very first thing she did was adopt them. The simple desires they couldn't fulfill together, she now effortlessly fulfilled alone. Happiness could be that simple. Miss Ainsley, I've baked a fresh pecan pie. Wash your hands and come have a slice, a warm voice called out. It was Martha, the housekeeper who had practically raised Ainsley. Yes, Martha. Have a piece with me, Ainsley replied, thoroughly petting both dogs before standing up. Ainsley's mother had passed away when she was 3. All her maternal memories were provided by Martha. After her father died, Ainsley had tried multiple times to move Martha into the Tribeca penthouse, but she always refused. Miss Ainsley, you have your own family now. The most important thing is to build a life with your husband. It doesn't matter where I live as long as you're doing well. Even when Ainsley insisted Martha would only agree to visit occasionally to help clean or cook, even then Thaddeus was always visibly uncomfortable. He didn't say it, but Ainsley, who loved him deeply, felt his rigid tension. Thaddeus loathed having his heavily sanitized private sanctuary invaded by outsiders, especially someone like Martha. Eventually, Martha stopped coming to the penthouse altogether. Ainsley had no choice but to buy Martha a beautiful home in a quiet New Jersey suburb and visit her when she could. Martha had spent her entire life serving the Sterling family, never marrying or having children of her own. Sitting at the kitchen island with Martha eating the warm pecan pie, Ainsley suddenly felt the profound warmth of a real home. She repeated to herself, "Don't compare, don't compare." You were happy by his side once too. But she knew that happiness had just been her own desperate illusion, a completely one-sided fantasy. Martha, do you think it would be okay if I lived alone for the rest of my life, just like you? Ainsley asked softly, her gaze landing on Martha's clear, aging eyes. Martha paused for a moment, then smiled tenderly. Her eyes were full of unconditional love. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you want to do is perfectly fine. You can choose exactly the life you want, and you're not alone. You have me." Hearing this, Ainsley smiled, a smile mixed with tears. Ainsley was approaching 30. In this short life, she had rebelled, she had been foolish, she had gambled everything on love and lost. She thought her life was a tragedy. But now she realized that this moment was true perfection. The Sterling Group was expanding aggressively, she had her dogs, people who genuinely loved her, and great friends. She had achieved absolute freedom, untethered to anyone or anything. "Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. If Mr. Sterling saw you hurting, it would break his heart." Martha stood up and hugged Ainsley tightly. "Your life is only going to get better. We are all right here with you." Ainsley slept incredibly well that night. It was the deepest sleep she'd had in years. She dreamed of her parents. They were holding hands and smiling at her. "Ainsley, Mom and Dad are so proud of you. We are watching over you from heaven, and we will bless you until you are truly, completely happy." According to our local correspondent, the young American CEO, Ainsley Sterling, has successfully acquired 15 acres of highly coveted real estate in downtown Seattle. She plans to construct a state-of-the-art residential complex for young tech entrepreneurs. On a massive jumbotron in Times Square, a financial news anchor was reporting the latest corporate shakeups. Our network secured an exclusive interview with Miss Sterling. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for this exceptional visionary. Below the glowing screens, people scrolling on their phones or rushing to work paused to admire Ainsley's achievement. The housing crisis in major tech hubs had always been a massive issue. Now that someone was building subsidized luxury housing for startups, others might follow suit. Ainsley had explicitly stated this in her interview. Currently, the Sterling Group's focus is heavily on international expansion, including London, Tokyo, and several European markets. It is a profound honor to be able to contribute even modestly to the brilliant young minds right here at home. Ainsley, wearing a sharp, tailored ivory power suit, looked intellectual, untouchable, and fiercely professional. "And what about your philanthropic efforts back in New York?" a reporter asked. "The charitable trusts, the educational grants, the youth outreach programs, all of our initiatives in New York will continue fully funded. Also, now that I am the proud owner of 2 large rescue dogs, I am heavily considering launching a nationwide animal rescue foundation." Ainsley smiled radiantly at the camera. "If any no-kill shelters need emergency funding, please contact the Sterling Group's New York office directly. We will review all applications and deploy support immediately." Thaddeus, who was just emerging from the subway station, snapped his head up at the sound of that devastatingly familiar voice and froze. Countless commuters shoved past him. Someone aggressively bumped his shoulder, cursing, but he didn't even flinch. Ainsley, seeing the person he had agonized over day and night, Thaddeus nearly burst into tears right there in Times Square. Even though it was through a cold LED screen, he finally knew she was alive and thriving. So this was who she truly was. Thaddeus couldn't help but smile with intense self-loathing. During their 9 years of marriage, Ainsley had stepped back almost entirely from the public face of the Sterling Group, all for him. She stopped attending galas, avoided press conferences, and refused interviews. Because he loved absolute quiet and privacy, she had muted her own brilliant light to match his shadows. Thaddeus had completely forgotten how magnetically charismatic Ainsley was as a corporate titan. She was originally a proud, self-assured, unstoppable force of nature. Now that he knew where Ainsley was, Thaddeus immediately booked a first-class ticket to Seattle. Before leaving for the airport, he stopped by the New York Aquarium again. He bought premium food for the 2 butterfly fish and upgraded them to a massive, custom-built tank. "Sir, you didn't come with your wife this time," the aquarium guide noted while ringing him up. "I made a terrible mistake, and I hurt her." For some reason, faced with this stranger he had only met once, Thaddeus felt an overwhelming urge to confess. "Oh man. Then you have to really, truly repent. Think hard about how to earn her forgiveness. It was obvious your wife loved you deeply. I could see it in the way she looked at you that day. Apologize properly and win her back." The guide threw in some high-end aquatic plants and decorative stones for free. As Thaddeus left the shop, the guide added seriously, "Sir, there are some people in this world that if you let them slip away once, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I sincerely hope you don't end up with regrets. With how much she loved you, you cannot let her down." Thaddeus nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I will win her back. Thank you." After leaving the shop, Thaddeus went alone to the Utopia Parkway subway station. Watching the sea of humanity rushing by, so many people smiling at reunions, crying at farewells, Thaddeus finally understood why Ainsley's expression had been so profoundly sorrowful that day. Utopia Parkway, the final stop. A place of departures where paths never cross again. She had already said her final goodbye to him that day. After a brutal cross-country flight, Thaddeus finally landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. He had barely slept 3 hours on the plane. The rest of the time he stared out the window at the clouds. His mind was entirely consumed by images of Ainsley. As the flight crossed time zones, the physical distance shortened, but Thaddeus's heart grew increasingly anxious, bordering on sheer terror. During those 3 brief hours of sleep, he suffered strange, fragmented nightmares. In the dream, Thaddeus honestly confessed his lingering feelings for Serena during his early days dating Ainsley. Ainsley looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, Thad. I cannot accept a man who holds another woman in his heart." "Okay, I'll carve her out of my chest and come back to love you," Dream Thaddeus promised. "I won't wait for you, so you better hurry," Ainsley said softly. He nodded frantically, repeating, "Okay, okay." Then the scene violently shifted. Thaddeus was 17 again. A new transfer student walked into his AP Bio class. She introduced herself as Ainsley. He fell in love at first sight, brought her coffee every morning, tutored her in silence, and walked her home. At graduation, he confessed, "I've been in love with you for a long time. Give me a chance." She smiled like a passing cloud, like a warm summer breeze. "Okay, Thad. I'll give you a chance." She stepped closer to him, smelling of expensive orange blossom perfume. "I'll give you the chance to love me." Thaddeus jolted awake as the plane touched down. He opened his phone. It was 4:48 p.m. On his lock screen, Ainsley was smiling brilliantly. Thaddeus smiled weakly. "Ainsley, this time it's my turn to love you." Walking out of the terminal, the biting Seattle wind brought a freezing drizzle. It was raining in the Pacific Northwest. Thaddeus reached out, letting the icy drops hit his palm. Without him noticing, summer had died. And autumn had quietly taken over. At the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle, looking at the glittering Seattle skyline through the rain-streaked glass, Thaddeus realized that the city was massive, and he still didn't know Ainsley's exact location. Was this all just a futile, desperate hope? Thaddeus didn't sleep a wink that night. Across town, Ainsley was mildly stressed over what to wear to a high society gala. Her friend Gideon was hosting a massive charity ball at the Four Seasons. Top-tier luxury houses, Oscar de la Renta, Tom Ford, Saint Laurent Chanel, had dispatched their latest haute couture collections to Ainsley's estate. But neither she nor Martha could find anything that felt quite right. Finally, Ainsley selected a breathtaking pale emerald custom gown by Oscar de la Renta. With her hair elegantly swept up by Martha and secured with a vintage diamond hairpin, she looked like modern American royalty. "I haven't seen you this dressed up in ages, sweetheart. You look absolutely magnificent," Martha praised genuinely. Ainsley looked at herself in the full-length mirror, slightly dazed. She had simply reverted to who she used to be. 8:10 p.m. The Four Seasons Hotel. The moment Ainsley stepped out of the Maybach, she was blinded by a barrage of camera flashes. It was a chaotic welcome. Gideon had intentionally orchestrated. "Ainsley, how does it feel to be the star of the show?" Walking down the red carpet, Ainsley linked her arm through Gideon's. "Do you make the paparazzi hound everyone like this?" Ainsley joked. "Hell no, just you. The other billionaires wanted to punch me." Gideon laughed, feigning offense. As soon as they entered the grand ballroom, a striking young man with jet black hair, piercing blue eyes, broad shoulders, and long legs approached Ainsley. "Good evening, Miss Sterling. Would you do me the honor of being my partner tonight?" Ainsley was instantly intrigued. "Of course. And your name is—" She placed her hand in his large, warm palm. "Kellen Rhodes," he replied smoothly. "All right, Mr. Rhodes." They walked onto the dance floor, hand in hand. Gideon stomped his foot nearby, shouting playfully, "Ainsley, don't ditch your best friend for a pretty face." But after yelling, he smiled with deep satisfaction. As a true friend, he wanted nothing more than to see Ainsley find happiness again. After a sweeping waltz, Ainsley and Kellen stepped out onto the terrace to catch some air. The cool night breeze ruffled Ainsley's hair. Kellen took a step closer and gently tucked a stray strand behind her ear. Ainsley didn't pull away. The physical distance between them instantly became intimate and electric. Right at that moment, an incredibly hoarse, disbelieving voice cut through the air. "Ainsley." Ainsley turned her head slightly and saw the one person who absolutely should not have been there. Her expression remained placid. She offered a faint, polite smile. "Good evening. Mr. Vance, is everything all right?" Kellen's piercing blue gaze shifted to the man who had suddenly appeared. He frowned slightly. Thaddeus's eyes, dark and turbulent as a stormy sea, were locked obsessively on Ainsley. "Miss Sterling, is this a friend?" Kellen asked. Ainsley nodded without hesitation, answering with brutal frankness. "My ex-husband from New York." "Ah, Kellen said, a knowing competitive edge entering his voice. Ancient history. Yes, Ainsley replied courteously. I believe you'll have to excuse us for a moment, Kellen. It seems he has something to say. Understood. Kellen smiled like a perfect gentleman and stepped back gracefully. But after a few steps, he turned back. Miss Sterling, you're still my partner for the next dance, right? Ainsley couldn't help but smile warmly. Of course. We're partners for the whole night, aren't we? Receiving her affirmation, Kellen walked away looking highly satisfied. However, as he brushed past a deathly pale Thaddeus, he lowered his voice to a lethal whisper. You already lost her, man. Those words caused Thaddeus to physically flinch, the last remnants of color draining from his face. How did you get in here? Ainsley looked at Thaddeus as if he were a complete stranger, her expression terrifyingly serene. I came looking for you, Ainsley. Thaddeus barely managed a broken smile. He took a desperate step toward her, but when he was about 3 paces away, she held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. We are divorced. It would be best to maintain an appropriate social distance, Ainsley stated, pointing at the space between them. Her demeanor was aristocratic and ice-cold. Now tell me, how did you find me? Hearing this, Thaddeus froze solid. He smiled a wretched, self-deprecating smile. 2 hours earlier in his hotel room, Thaddeus had opened his laptop. He remembered that several of his Columbia Med School classmates had gone on to launch biotech startups in Seattle. Perhaps one of them knew the location of the Sterling Group's new HQ. Clinging to that microscopic hope, Thaddeus called one of them. Thad, man, what a blast from the past. What do you need? If I can help, name it. This particular classmate had always been incredibly indebted to him. After hesitating, Thaddeus asked, Do you happen to know where the Sterling Group's new headquarters is? Or do you know Ainsley? Ainsley Sterling, the billionaire? How the hell do you know her? The classmate asked, shocked. It's a long story. I'll buy you a drink and explain later. But I'm in Seattle right now. Well, I've only seen Miss Sterling once at a charity auction, but I grab drinks with a buddy of hers sometimes. He told me he's hosting a massive gala at the Four Seasons tonight. Real heavy hitters. I actually got an invite, but I'm on call at the ER tonight and can't go. If you want to crash it, I can courier the VIP pass to your hotel. That was how Thaddeus had gained entry. He had rushed to Nordstrom, bought an off-the-rack tuxedo, and hired a car to the Four Seasons. From the moment Ainsley entered the ballroom, his eyes hadn't left her. Elegant, dominant, blindingly radiant, half the room's gaze was locked on Ainsley. Thaddeus felt a violent, consuming jealousy for the very first time in his life. When the dark-haired heir invited Ainsley to dance, Thaddeus had nearly lost his mind. He hadn't wanted to ruin such a hard-fought reunion, so he had restrained himself until now. But the Ainsley standing before him clearly didn't need him in her life whatsoever. Ainsley, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Before Thaddeus could finish, Ainsley cut him off. She looked at him in silence. They hadn't seen each other in over a month, and Thaddeus looked gaunt. Mutual acquaintances in New York had already informed her of his downfall. He had been effectively terminated from St. Jude's. He had become a shut-in. Despite being rejected, ignored, and humiliated, he was still obsessively tracking her down. Thaddeus had always claimed it was just habit, that he didn't truly love her. But after losing her, the reality had shattered him. He discarded his legendary pride, humiliating himself just to find her. However, a delayed realization of love cannot heal a decade of deep psychological wounds. Ainsley wasn't moved. She only found it exhausting. Thaddeus, we are divorced. Your apologies mean absolutely nothing to me. Ainsley's voice remained soft, but that extreme gentleness nearly made Thaddeus burst into tears. I know, Ainsley. Not everything can be fixed with an apology. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just felt I had to grovel in person. Thaddeus smiled bitterly. Actually, when we first met, you weren't the only one who fell in love at first sight. But I was blinded by a pathetic obsession with the past. Perhaps it was my fragile male ego. Thaddeus's words were slow and weak. During the days he had spent isolated in the brownstone, he had analyzed the past, the present, and the future relentlessly. Thaddeus knew Ainsley had every right to reject him. He had hallucinated the scene of her rejection countless times. Every time. It felt like his chest was being sawed open without anesthesia. It was karma for what Serena did to me. I never got over her. I couldn't accept that her ambition was more important than me. She had seemed to love me so much. That's why I couldn't let it go for all those years. And with you, Ainsley, you were so perfect. You loved me so intensely. Thaddeus felt a stabbing pain in his heart. I started taking your devotion for granted. I subconsciously wanted to test how deep it ran to see if you would abandon me like she did. But you were right. A man who holds another woman in his heart doesn't deserve to be loved at all. For 10 years, I wasn't worthy to even stand beside you." Thaddeus looked at Ainsley with bloodshot eyes. He knew his confession sounded chaotic and pathetic. He didn't care if she was confused. He was willing to spend the rest of his life explaining, proving his devotion. "Ainsley, please. Can you give me one more chance?" Thaddeus begged, his voice breaking completely. Ainsley remained silent. She understood the sickening psychology behind Thaddeus's words. For him, love was a dangerous, volatile game. He needed to prove he was worthy of love by subjecting the people who cared about him to endless, agonizing tests. Thus, even when Ainsley poured all her love into him, his response was to push her harder and harder until she finally broke and left. And when she did, even though he was in agony, his broken mind considered it validation. "See, nobody actually loves me." This was undoubtedly rooted in Thaddeus's traumatic childhood. Ainsley remembered that his father had abandoned the family, only surfacing to extort them for cash. His fragile mother had to become ruthlessly strict to keep them off the streets. She demanded absolute perfection from her son, pushing him to extreme psychological limits. Thaddeus grew up in a war zone. First, he developed the severe OCD and misophobia as a control mechanism. Then, after his high school sweetheart abandoned him for a better life, his avoidant attachment personality permanently cemented itself. Ainsley had loved Thaddeus with her entire soul once, which was why she could psychoanalyze the trauma behind his cruelty. But she could not forgive him. She was a living, breathing human being who needed to be loved, not a sacrificial lamb for his psychological rehabilitation. "I'm sorry, Thaddeus." Ainsley looked at him with eyes full of polite pity. "I don't want to give you a chance. There is zero possibility between us." As soon as Ainsley finished speaking, Thaddeus felt the blood freeze in his veins. A violent chill swept through his entire body. The autumn in Seattle was brutally cold. He muttered incoherently to himself. Ainsley stepped closer to him, breaching the distance she had established. She reached out and clinically straightened his crooked bow tie. In a low, icy whisper, she said, "Thaddeus, our summer has been over for a long time. In the future, you will meet someone else who might love you. But before you do, I highly recommend you see a psychiatrist." Ainsley took a step back. "We are both adults. We both know that no one in this world is indispensable. Of course, it's rare to find someone who loves another person as deeply as I loved you." She bit her lip and offered a devastatingly beautiful smile. "What I mean is, I didn't actually love you that much. Not to the point where I can't live without you." That meant he didn't need to force her to love him or destroy himself trying to win her back. "Thaddeus, you are sick." Those were the absolute last words Ainsley said to him. As she brushed past him to return to the ballroom, she felt nothing but a profound, weightless relief. Reunited at last, her heart truly felt not a single ripple of emotion for him. Perhaps, as she said, she really didn't love him that much anymore. Adults eventually get bored of the pain. Thaddeus stood paralyzed on the terrace for hours. A waiter asked if he needed medical assistance, but he only shook his head blankly. The freezing Seattle rain soaked through the lapels of his tuxedo. The autumn wind chilled him to the marrow. At 30 years old, he was plunged back into the horrific rainy despair he had experienced at 17. Only this time, the devastation was 1,000 times worse. In Thaddeus's world, lightning struck and an apocalyptic storm began. Time, like an overly energetic puppy, sprinted forward relentlessly. For 2 straight weeks, Ainsley didn't see a trace of Thaddeus. Instead, Kellen Rhodes was practically living at her office, constantly asking her out. At the Sterling Group HQ on the 55th floor, Ainsley was reviewing a stack of zoning permits. Blythe knocked on the glass door and walked in looking a bit uncomfortable. "Miss, Sterling Mr. Rhodes is here." Again. This week alone, Kellen had barged into the corporate offices 3 times. When he didn't show up in person, he flooded the reception desk with thousands of dollars worth of rare orchids, artisanal chocolates, and catered lunches for the entire executive floor, arriving precisely at 3:30 p.m. every day. Ainsley couldn't help but massage her temples. "Send him in!" Honestly, Kellen's rugged, blue-eyed aesthetic was exactly her type, but he was far too young, 10 years her junior, fresh out of an Ivy League MBA program. Ainsley had found this out after having Blythe run a deep background check on him after the gala. That night, Kellen had gotten tipsy after 3 cocktails, and she had instructed her driver to drop him off at the W Hotel. It turned out Kellen was the youngest son of the Rhodes tech dynasty, and he was currently supposed to be working as a risk analyst at his family's firm. "Ainsley, I brought you a matcha Basque cheesecake straight from the oven." Kellen swaggered into her office with extreme confidence. In his hand was a chic little green pastry box that completely clashed with his bad boy image. Thank you, Kellen, but you wildly overestimate my appetite. I just had an iced Americano. I can't eat a single bite right now. Ainsley looked at him with exhausted resignation. Kellen pretended not to notice her annoyance. Then I'll put it in your mini fridge for later. He winked at her. Flirting is an art. Knowing and pretending not to know. Not knowing and pretending to know. Seriously, how about you hire me as your personal risk analyst? I'll leak all the Rhodes Group's corporate weaknesses to you. Kellen planted his hands on Ainsley's massive mahogany desk, looking dead serious. Thank you, but I actually possess a shred of business ethics. And aren't you a little too eager to betray your own family? Ainsley pointed a pen at his forehead. It was undeniable being around this energetic young man was incredibly comfortable. She was surrounded by cutthroat tech bros, and Blythe and her team were intensely formal. Gideon was utterly unpredictable. The only person Ainsley could banter with comfortably in this city was surprisingly Kellen Rhodes. Thinking of this, she offered, I'm buying lunch today. How about it? You pick the restaurant. At the Four Seasons Hotel. Thaddeus fell violently ill the moment he returned to his room that night. A horrific fever spiked and refused to break. Luckily, he was a doctor and had an emergency medical kit in his luggage. After hooking himself up to an IV, Thaddeus fell into an endless, delirious sleep. He dreamed of his childhood and of the rainy night he first met Ainsley in the trauma ward. It was the genesis of all his joy and his ultimate ruin. Thad, you are everything to me. You are my only hope. Do you understand? How many times have I told you not to go out after school? The only thing that matters is studying. Only getting into a top medical school can drag you out of this hellhole so you don't become a worthless failure like your father, Thad. I'm so sorry. Mom loves you. I didn't mean to hit you. It was his mother, screaming, crying, apologizing. Thaddeus wanted to grab her rough, calloused hand and tell her that he had finally succeeded, that he was a millionaire surgeon. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't reach her. He could only watch her sob in despair. I'm sorry, Thad. Mom was wrong. I put so much pressure on you to succeed that I forgot to teach you how to love. That's why you don't know how to properly love anyone else. That's why. Thaddeus stood there paralyzed. He suddenly remembered Ainsley's parting words on the terrace. Thaddeus, you are sick. In the nightmare, the scene violently shifted again. Thaddeus saw Ainsley on a gurney in the ER, her life slipping away. Blood everywhere. Her blood. Dr. Vance. The patient was in a severe T-bone collision. Massive hemorrhaging deep coma. A trauma nurse shouted frantically. It was the very first emergency surgery Thaddeus had performed as a lead attending in New York. The ECG flatlined multiple times before a faint, thready pulse returned. The grueling surgery lasted 12 hours and Ainsley was finally transferred to the ICU. Even through his surgical gloves, Thaddeus could still remember the terrifying heat of Ainsley's blood. During the operation, he had prayed to a god he didn't believe in countless times. Live. Please do not give up. Don't make everyone's desperate efforts in vain. Live. Miraculously, Ainsley's sheer will to survive was overwhelmingly strong. She was the most resilient patient Thaddeus had ever encountered in his career. The day Ainsley woke up from the coma, Thaddeus brought a meticulously sanitized bouquet of sunflowers into her room. It was the only splash of color in the blindingly sterile ICU. Lying in the hospital bed, Ainsley wore an oxygen mask. Her breathing was incredibly weak, but she managed a faint, beautiful smile. Her voice was a raspy whisper. Thank you, Dr. Vance. I heard everything you said. It was the exact moment Thaddeus felt his deadened heart beat violently for the first time in years. The desperate, pleading words he had whispered beside her bed when he thought she couldn't hear, she had heard every single syllable. Thad, you saved my life, and in return, I loved you with zero regrets for 10 years. How about we call it even? In the dream, Ainsley was sitting in a wheelchair. She turned to him and asked the question, but his throat felt entirely blocked. He couldn't force a single word out. Thad, I truly did love you, but we are permanently finished. After those words, Thaddeus jolted awake again. He ripped out his IV and tore open the heavy hotel curtains. The sky was still a depressing gray and the rain was pouring down in sheets. Thaddeus couldn't see the Seattle skyline, nor could he see a future with Ainsley. Perhaps that future had been entirely eradicated. Thaddeus smiled a broken, hysterical smile. He realized that he desperately, urgently needed to see a psychiatrist. Thaddeus Vance was truly clinically sick. After lunch, a torrential downpour hit the city. Kellen insisted on driving. I know Seattle's roads way better than you do, Ainsley. Ainsley couldn't argue with that. She only warned him, this is my new car. Be extremely careful. It was a classic Shelby Cobra, an impossibly rare, discontinued vintage model worth a small fortune. Ainsley rarely drove herself back in New York, but in Seattle, having her own car felt liberating. So what was the real reason you divorced your ex-husband? Kellen asked out of nowhere while Ainsley was buckling her seatbelt in the passenger seat. What reason does there need to be for a divorce? You fall out of love. You get bored. The novelty wears off. Ainsley didn't want to publicly trash Thaddeus's reputation to an outsider, meaning love has an expiration date and yours was 10 years. Kellen spun the steering wheel, expertly leaning closer to Ainsley while they waited at a red light. Come on. Aside from your parents, who is going to unconditionally love you for 10 years, let alone 100 for absolutely no reason? Ainsley pushed Kellen's face back toward the windshield. In her eyes, he was just a naive kid. 24 years old, handed a VP title at his family's firm, essentially still living in a frat house bubble. Protected by extreme wealth, never having experienced the brutal meat grinder of corporate warfare or the devastating trauma of a broken marriage. That was why he was so painfully direct, so relentlessly persistent. Ainsley didn't mind showing Kellen a bit more patience, treating him almost like an annoying younger brother. But outside the car, the rain was turning into a blinding deluge. "Watch out!" Ainsley shrieked, seeing a dark silhouette suddenly stumble into the middle of the intersection. But it was too late. Crash. Harborview Medical Center. Kellen and Ainsley only suffered minor bruises thanks to the vintage car's retrofitted airbags. The Seattle PD interrogated them and severely reprimanded Kellen, who had been behind the wheel. Ainsley looked at the deeply dejected Kellen and sighed. A 3-month license suspension is a slap on the wrist, I asked the charge nurse. The pedestrian is in pretty bad shape. Do you want to come see him with me? Kellen nodded meekly. Only then did the arrogant edge to his features soften. Ainsley couldn't help but think of her sulking golden retriever at home. Opening the door to the trauma ward, the tension in both of their bodies instantly morphed into absolute shock. Thaddeus, how? How is it you— Are you all right? Ainsley rushed to the hospital bed, horrified by the thick bandages wrapping Thaddeus's head and right arm. Thaddeus shook his head weakly. His voice was a rasp. I'm fine. Why the hell did you walk out into the street like that? Do you have a death wish? Kellen exploded, his anxiety manifesting as anger. He had slammed on the brakes the second Ainsley screamed, but the rain had made the road a slip-and-slide. I'm sorry. I couldn't see the pedestrian signal, Thaddeus murmured. In that moment, he had been completely dissociated, stumbling forward through the rain without feeling his own body. He never expected that the car that hit him would be driven by Kellen and Ainsley. He looked at Ainsley's panic-stricken face and tried to comfort her. It's just a hairline fracture. It's nothing. Ainsley's eyes instantly welled up with angry tears. Nothing. Do you not realize how critical a surgeon's hands are? It wasn't that her heart ached for him romantically. She was terrified that if this accident destroyed his ability to operate, countless desperate patients would lose their chance at a miracle. If it weren't for Thaddeus's hands, she wouldn't even be standing in this room. You looked completely out of it. The nurse said you also had deep lacerations, all up and down your left arm. How did that happen? Thaddeus lowered his gaze, refusing to speak the truth. Tell me right now. Ainsley's voice cracked like a whip. I was experiencing severe auditory and visual hallucinations. I saw you and my dead mother standing in the intersection. Thaddeus finally confessed, his voice hollow. Ainsley plunged into a horrified silence. She didn't know how to process this. It took agonizing effort for a man as prideful as Thaddeus to admit in front of the woman he loved and his younger rival that he was suffering from a complete psychotic break. Thankfully, Ainsley didn't press the issue and chose mercy. She remembered that just 2 weeks ago on the terrace, she had told him to see a psychiatrist. 10 years of marriage. Ainsley easily recognized the symptoms of severe psychological exhaustion and sleep deprivation. Thaddeus's skin was translucent and the dark. Bruised bags under his eyes were terrifying. Are you not used to the hotel mattress? Ainsley asked softly. She remembered that for the past 10 years, Thaddeus could only sleep on a hyper-specific imported Tempur-Pedic mattress. He always complained that standard beds were either too firm or too soft. Ainsley had once joked that he was as delicate as the princess and the pea. Thaddeus had gotten so offended he slept in his hospital on-call room for 3 days. But Thaddeus only shook his head slightly. I just can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I dream of you and my mother. These were words Thaddeus could never have admitted aloud before. He constantly remembered what Ainsley had said. We are divorced. There is zero possibility between us. Don't worry, I'll do exactly what you said, Thaddeus promised earnestly. As soon as I'm discharged, I'll admit myself to a psychiatric facility. Seeing him like this, Ainsley felt a sharp pang of profound bitterness in her chest. Since when had the arrogant, untouchable Dr. Vance become so pathetic, so terrified of offending her, but thinking about it logically, he had brought all of this entirely upon himself. Those who betray absolute devotion must be punished, and Thaddeus's punishment was only just beginning. Ainsley's gaze fell on Thaddeus's hand, heavily bruised from multiple blown IV lines. Fine, it wasn't just a one-time breakdown. She lowered her head. And the cuts on your arm, how did you get those? She demanded. Kellen's aggressive posture softened significantly upon hearing this. He had overheard the trauma nurses whispering outside. Self-inflicted lacerations, old scars mixed with fresh ones. When Thaddeus refused to answer, Kellen suddenly grew irritated to mask his guilt. You don't have to answer. I'm going to the billing department to cover all your medical expenses. Stay here as long as you need. When you're fully recovered, they'll discharge you. Don't try to sue me later claiming permanent damage. With that, Kellen looked at Ainsley. Seeing she had no intention of leaving with him just yet, he had no choice but to storm out, slamming the door. Watching Kellen's dramatic exit, Ainsley couldn't help but crack a tiny smile. Thaddeus, looking utterly lost, stared at her. Ainsley, I haven't seen you smile like that in so long. Truly, Thaddeus said unconsciously. He remembered the week before Ainsley had vanished. She was always smiling, but it was a dead plastic smile. Even back then, Thaddeus had sensed it, but he had never bothered to ask what was wrong. He always assumed he and Ainsley had an infinite amount of time. Since she loved him so desperately, it didn't matter how long he ignored her. He didn't realize that a woman's love is slowly murdered by 1,000 tiny acts of indifference. I've booked an emergency psychiatric consult for this afternoon. I've carved every single word you said to me into my heart, Thaddeus whispered, terrified of overstepping. Hearing this, Ainsley didn't know how to react. Thaddeus, she wanted to scream. Stop destroying yourself for me. Stop these futile, desperate gestures. But Thaddeus was a severely injured patient right now. Aside from his mental collapse, the physical trauma to his body had been caused by her and Kellen's car. Ainsley sighed heavily. The atmosphere in the sterile hospital room suddenly became suffocatingly awkward. She stood up and said carefully, Thaddeus, focus on your recovery. I'll have Blythe arrange for organic meals to be delivered to your room. As she turned to leave, Thaddeus weakly grabbed the hem of her designer coat. I know I have no right to ask, but could you please come visit me? Just occasionally? This time, Thaddeus placed all the power in Ainsley's hands. He was completely submissive, operating from a position of total defeat. Ainsley thought for a moment before finally speaking. As you know, the company just relocated here, and I genuinely do not have a single second of free time. It was a rejection delivered with polite corporate efficiency. Thaddeus's eyelashes fluttered shut, masking his agony. Understood. Then please don't overwork yourself. Take care of your health. Yes. Ainsley looked down at him and offered a soft, pitying smile. You too. The heavy door clicked shut. The room, which had briefly felt alive, plunged back into a suffocating silence. Thaddeus painfully turned his head to look out the window. He was on the 7th floor. Outside, the Seattle maples had already turned a violently bright red. The autumn wind howled, and countless maple leaves drifted down. Just then, a single maple leaf mottled with dying green and brilliant yellow blew through the crack in Thaddeus's window. He stared at it for a long, agonizing time. Finally, he forced his broken body out of the hospital bed, limped to the window, and picked up the dead leaf. Many things in the past, just like the wind, blow through and leave no trace. And just like this fallen leaf ripped from its branch, what is lost, what is squandered, can never be reattached. Thaddeus didn't sleep a single minute that night. Meanwhile, at her estate, Ainsley's mind was a chaotic mess. Martha brewed her a cup of calming chamomile tea and sat across from her, offering silent support. Martha, he followed me to Seattle. Today, while Kellen was driving my car, we hit him, Ainsley blurted out. Martha didn't ask for details. She knew exactly who he was. She just looked with profound tenderness at the girl she had raised as her own. Did seeing him make you feel the way you used to? Ainsley shook her head violently. No. Seeing him only reminds me of the 10 years I spent being humiliated and deceived. I wasn't happy, Martha. Then let the past remain in the past, sweetheart. If he doesn't bring you joy, never see him again. You can't get those 10 years back, so you must guard your heart and walk boldly into your next 10 years. Martha reached across the table and took Ainsley's cold hands. If you choose it, the next 10 years can be the most beautiful decade of your entire life. Yes, Ainsley smiled, a genuine smile breaking through the tears. A shattered mirror is nearly impossible to piece back together, and even if you force it with superglue, the jagged cracks remain forever. Like a shard of glass embedded deep in the skin, it aches sharply every time pressure is applied. Ainsley never went to visit Thaddeus again. On one hand, the Sterling Group truly had massive developments requiring her direct oversight, like the tech entrepreneur housing project. On the other hand, she knew that if she was the root cause of his psychotic break, she absolutely could not give him false hope and exacerbate his illness. Besides, Kellen and Blythe's legal team had already handled the financial compensation for the accident perfectly. Thinking of Kellen, Ainsley massaged her temples again. He was still obsessively chasing her, and he had literally quit his VP job at his family's multi-billion-dollar firm just to apply as her personal assistant. So now, Ainsley was forced to see Kellen every single day. "Good morning, Miss Sterling. I brought you a vanilla oat milk latte, half-sweet, speak of the devil." Kellen strolled into her office, holding a tray of coffees, flashing a blinding Hollywood smile. "I specifically asked for an iced Americano," Ainsley said, baffled. "Iced Americanos suppress your appetite, and drinking too much espresso is terrible for your adrenal glands," Kellen explained as if he were citing federal law. Ainsley's brow twitched. "You are my employee now, Kellen, not my friend. This is a corporate environment, and you cannot overwrite my executive orders with your personal opinions. In business terms, when a superior gives you a direct directive, you execute it flawlessly to their exact specifications." She hit the intercom button. "Blythe, please bring me an iced Americano." After receiving confirmation that it would arrive in 2 minutes, Ainsley glared at Kellen. "Do you understand? If you don't want to remain a spoiled billionaire's son forever, take notes from Blythe. All qualified heirs must survive a grueling stint at the absolute bottom of the corporate ladder. Empathy is only built in the trenches." She hadn't intended to lecture him, but if she let him run wild, he would undermine her authority. "Understood, ma'am." Kellen dropped his playful demeanor and nodded with stark seriousness. "Drink the latte yourself. Work hard so you can be the boss one day." Ainsley pushed her gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of her nose and buried herself back in her contracts. In her heart, there were already a million things infinitely more important than romantic love. A severe bone fracture requires at least 100 days of absolute rest. Thaddeus spent 45 days in the inpatient ward at Harborview Medical Center. During those 45 days, his only visitors were Blythe and Kellen. Blythe was eternally professional. Whenever Thaddeus pathetically asked about Ainsley, her response was always clinically distant. "Miss Sterling is doing exceptionally well. She is currently occupied with a board meeting." Kellen was the exact opposite of Blythe. He would frequently pull up a chair next to Thaddeus's bed, interrogating him like an overeager frat boy. "Know thy enemy and know thyself, and you shall win 100 battles. I need to figure out exactly why Ainsley divorced you so I don't screw up and make the same fatal errors." Kellen didn't seem to think his brazenness was inappropriate. His attitude was frustratingly natural. But Thaddeus never showed a hint of impatience. Through Kellen's annoying ramblings, Thaddeus could extract tiny, precious details about Ainsley's current life. "Ugh, Ainsley yelled at me for buying her a latte. She said she needs black coffee to stay sharp. She's been working like a total maniac lately." Hearing this, Thaddeus thought to himself, did she work this ruthlessly back in New York? Thaddeus genuinely didn't know. In his memory for the past decade, Ainsley had always prioritized him above everything else. She was always right there when he looked up exactly where he needed her. She did a live interview with Bloomberg today, looked drop-dead gorgeous and terrifyingly smart. She went to inspect the downtown construction site and didn't even bring me. After Kellen left, Thaddeus painfully reached for the remote and turned on the flat-screen TV on the hospital wall, flipping to the financial news networks. He finally saw her again. She looked like she had lost a little weight, but her eyes burned with an unstoppable vitality. She looked like a conqueror. She seemed to be thoroughly enjoying her new empire. Thaddeus suddenly realized that this wasn't so bad. In the past, Ainsley had orchestrated massive things for him in complete silence, demanding zero recognition. Now it was his turn to watch her from the shadows, maintaining a respectful distance. Just knowing she was alive, safe, and thriving was enough. Thaddeus wasn't sure if this was true acceptance surrender or if his toxic obsession was finally dissolving into genuine love. When he woke up in the dead of night in a cold sweat, he still dreamed of his 10 years with Ainsley. 10 years contained a terrifying amount of unforgettable memories. Their honeymoon trip was to Iceland. They had watched the spectacular aurora borealis explode across a frozen wasteland. The first time they tried to cook a meal together in the Tribeca penthouse, they nearly burned it down, making basic scrambled eggs and roasted peppers. The first time they went to Coney Island, the first time they snuck into a midnight movie premiere, Countless firsts in Thaddeus's miserable life had been given to him by Ainsley. After finally being discharged from Harborview, Thaddeus immediately checked into an intensive outpatient psychiatric program. His severe misophobia and OCD were formally diagnosed as crippling manifestations of complex PTSD. The lead psychiatrist strongly recommended he return to New York to undergo long-term specialized cognitive behavioral therapy. Walking out of the clinic, Thaddeus looked up at the Seattle sky. It was late autumn. The Pacific Northwest would soon plunge into its brutal winter. "Thad, wouldn't it be amazing to have a massive snowball fight in Central Park? The snow is so pure, as clean as the rain." Ainsley's voice from a lifetime ago suddenly echoed in his ears. "Remember when we went to Iceland? I loved it so much. Do you want to live there with me forever, Thad? They say on the day of the first snow, you have to confess your true feelings. I love you." Thaddeus clenched his fists. He desperately needed to see Ainsley one last time. He pulled out his phone and texted the new corporate number Blythe had given him after the accident. "Good afternoon. I would like to request a brief meeting with Miss Sterling. Just once, for the absolute last time. Please relay this to her and allow her to decide." 10 agonizing minutes later, Blythe replied, "Miss Sterling has agreed. Please provide a time and location immediately. Her schedule is extremely tight." Thaddeus frantically checked the local meteorological reports for Seattle. With trembling fingers, he typed back, "November 12th, 3:30 p.m., Discovery Park." November 12th, Discovery Park. Thaddeus arrived 2 full hours before the agreed time. He checked the weather app again. Today, Seattle would experience its very first snowfall of the year. The first snow. Sitting on a frozen wooden bench, looking out over Puget Sound, Thaddeus gripped a small silver crucifix in his coat pocket. It had been pressed into his hand by a homeless, white-haired man when he was leaving the Four Seasons weeks ago. At the time, Thaddeus had tried to hand it back, saying coldly, "I'm sorry, I don't believe in God." He truly didn't believe in anything. He was a hardened man of science. But the old man had simply smiled warmly. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I bless you, my son. May your deepest prayers be answered." Hearing that Thaddeus had frozen, in that moment of hesitation, the homeless man had embraced him like a father, then turned and vanished down a winding Seattle alleyway. When Thaddeus snapped out of it and chased after him to give him a $100 bill, the man was gone. Instead, a young blonde boy on a bicycle, balancing a massive basket of flowers, was riding past. Thaddeus had stopped the boy. "Excuse me, could you help me pick out some flowers for the woman I love?" In their 10 years together, Thaddeus had practically never bought Ainsley flowers, even though she had never once complained. What woman doesn't love receiving flowers? The boy expertly selected a stunning bouquet of rare white primroses. He told Thaddeus enthusiastically, "Primroses mean, I cannot live without you. It means you want to be with your true love forever. It's a vow that, aside from the person standing in front of you, there is absolutely no one else in your heart. It's the ultimate declaration of eternal loyalty, mister. Buy these. They're perfect." Because of that promise, Thaddeus had bought every single primrose in the basket. Armed with the silver crucifix and the delicate bouquet, he waited at the park. The wait was excruciating. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was terrified that Blythe would suddenly text to say Ainsley was trapped in a board meeting and couldn't make it. Lately, he had seen Ainsley's face plastered across Forbes, Bloomberg, and Wall Street Journal features. Thaddeus knew exactly how powerful and busy she was. It only made him realize with crushing clarity how deeply she must have loved him to abandon all of that for a decade just to stay home and cook his specific meals. Thankfully, at exactly 3:32 p.m., Ainsley arrived. She looked effortlessly chic in a tailored cashmere trench coat. "I apologize," she said politely. "Traffic on I-5 was brutal. I'm 2 minutes late." She remembered how Thaddeus used to become irrationally furious if anyone was even 60 seconds late. "It's perfectly fine," Thaddeus said softly. He handed the bouquet of primroses to Ainsley. Lately, he had been religiously taking his psychiatric medications. And the woman standing before him was the Ainsley he intended to love in silence for the rest of his life. So waiting was perfectly fine. For me, Ainsley was mildly surprised. "Thank you." She accepted them gracefully. "They're beautiful," she complimented. "But do you have something you needed to say to me?" Ainsley had agreed to this meeting not because her resolve was wavering, nor out of crippling nostalgia, nor even out of pity. She simply wanted to put a definitive, formal period at the end of their 10-year sentence. "Ainsley, it's snowing." That was the second thing Thaddeus said that day. He looked up at the sky. Countless pure white snowflakes were drifting down from the heavy gray Seattle sky. Ainsley was stunned. She suddenly remembered telling Thaddeus in Iceland that she wanted to experience the first snow with him and hear a confession of love. Thaddeus, we are all ready. Although it was cruel, Ainsley had to remind him. This first snow was 10 years too late. It was no longer the magical snow she had once begged for. I know. Thaddeus smiled, a devastated, gentle smile. I just wanted to formally say goodbye to you. From this moment forward, I will never intrude on your life again. He looked deeply into Ainsley's eyes. I'm flying back to New York. My flight leaves the day after tomorrow. It was strange. While he had been waiting on the bench, he had rehearsed 1,000 desperate apologies. 1,000,000 promises. But now that they were standing face to face, the words evaporated. He just wanted to stand in the quiet snow with Ainsley for a few seconds. Ainsley, I know with absolute certainty that I love you. This love will probably consume me for the next 10 years, or maybe until the day I die, but that is entirely my burden to bear. I know I have forfeited the right to make you happy, Thaddeus said with profound, agonizing resignation. So today, just let me say a proper goodbye. Ainsley didn't know how to process her emotions in that moment. She had wanted to hear I love you from this man's lips for so long, that the very concept of those words had rotted away. The Ainsley standing here today clearly had no use for his confession. A blast of freezing wind swept off Puget Sound. For a split second, Ainsley hallucinated countless phantom images of her and Thaddeus. They were frozen in time, buried deep beneath the radioactive ruins of their 10-year marriage. One memory was painfully vivid. 10 years ago, days after her catastrophic surgery, Ainsley was finally allowed to be wheeled outside to breathe fresh air. Underneath the massive oak tree in the courtyard of Street Jude's, she officially met Thaddeus while fully conscious. Dr. Vance, can we formally introduce ourselves? I really don't want to keep calling my savior Dr. Vance for the rest of my life. If that innocent beginning had never happened, perhaps the agonizing decade of love, betrayal, and hatred would never have existed. Hatred, Ainsley asked herself. Perhaps at one point she truly had hated Thaddeus with a burning passion, but now all that remained was a vast, echoing emptiness and relief. In her 20s, Ainsley had loved with the force of a hurricane. She had never betrayed anyone. She had given it her absolute all. That was enough. She had no regrets about her own character. Ainsley, I pray you find a happiness greater than anyone else's. Thaddeus didn't tell Ainsley the true meaning behind the primroses. When he bought the flowers, he had suddenly remembered the daisies she used to love. The young florist had told him that daisies symbolized a love that one was too terrified to confess. So if Ainsley didn't want to hear it, he didn't need to force his confession upon her. A snowflake landed on Thaddeus's palm and instantly melted into a teardrop of water. Ainsley, standing in this whitewashed world, looked at Thaddeus. Thaddeus, I hope you find peace as well. I don't regret my 20s. I hope you don't either. She reached out and gently brushed a dusting of snow off his broad shoulders. Let the past remain in the past, both of us. Without ever looking back, let's walk bravely forward. Okay. Thaddeus smiled and nodded. They stood there in silence until the snow finally stopped falling. They walked out of Discovery Park shoulder to shoulder. Just being able to walk down the same path side by side was already a miracle. At the edge of the parking lot, they stopped and exchanged one final glance. You leave first. This time I will watch your back. Thaddeus said this because he remembered the countless times he had abandoned Ainsley for the hospital for his ego or for Serena. Back then, she had stood in silence, watching his silhouette walk away. Thaddeus couldn't even begin to fathom the crushing despair and isolation in Ainsley's heart during those moments. So this time, he had to be the one to watch her leave. Only by standing in the exact same position could a person truly comprehend the agony they inflicted. But even just saying those words felt like a serrated hunting knife was being twisted into his chest. Goodbye, Thaddeus. Ainsley didn't hesitate. She smiled, gave him a small definitive wave, turned on her heel, and walked to her waiting Maybach without ever looking back. November 14th. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Attention passengers. Delta Airlines Flight 402 to New York JFK is now completing boarding. Passenger Thaddeus Vance, please proceed to Gate A12 immediately. The automated female voice echoed relentlessly over the PA system. Thaddeus, standing rigidly near the gate podium, scanned the bustling terminal with desperate, bloodshot eyes. He was waiting for a person who would likely never appear. He was waiting for Ainsley. Since that day in the park, they had had zero contact, so he had only been able to text his flight info to Blythe. Human beings are pathetic creatures. Once you get a glimpse of heaven, you become ravenously greedy for more. They had explicitly said their final goodbyes, but before he left this city forever, he desperately wanted to see her face one last time. Perhaps if he boarded this plane, there would never be another chance in this lifetime to see her. Thaddeus couldn't keep his promise to not bother her. He waited until the absolute final boarding call. But Ainsley never appeared. And in that moment, Ainsley was sitting in a high-rise boardroom miles away, decisively signing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Have a safe flight, Thaddeus. The seasons violently shifted. Winter quietly bled into spring. The brutal cold and blistering heat rotated endlessly. Ainsley didn't return to New York, and she heard absolutely nothing about Thaddeus. But every New Year's Eve, or precisely at midnight on her birthday, a single comment would appear on her private, long-abandoned Instagram account. Happy New Year. Or Happy Birthday. Ainsley seemed to have completely forgotten that private account even existed. Thaddeus had never seen any new activity on it either. In fact, there was barely any content on the page to begin with. Just a few blurry, candid photos of him reading or sleeping that she had secretly taken years ago. While undergoing grueling psychiatric therapy in New York, Thaddeus relied on those few blurry photos to survive his agonizing withdrawals. Years evaporated. That year, Ainsley successfully expanded her corporate empire, establishing massive partnerships with top-tier real estate conglomerates in Tokyo and London. Her flagship housing project for American entrepreneurs was wildly successful and expanding nationally. Kellen, after surviving 6 brutal months as her overworked personal assistant, was finally summoned back by the CEO of the Rhodes Group to take his rightful place as heir apparent. Ainsley had recovered her absolute peace of mind. She finally had the freedom to travel the globe on her own terms. She hiked the Grand Canyon, scuba dived the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, chased the northern lights across Finland, and survived a blizzard in Siberia. She spent an entire year wandering, stopping whenever she pleased. Eventually, she found herself standing before the thundering majesty of Iguazu Falls on the border of Argentina and Brazil. Faced with the terrifying immensity of the falls, Ainsley finally logged into her private Instagram account for the first time in years. Thousands of unread notifications from a single user had piled up like a blizzard. She didn't have the time or desire to read them. Without a millisecond of hesitation, she deleted every single old photo of Thaddeus she had ever posted. Then Ainsley uploaded a breathtaking panoramic photo of Iguazu Falls. She captioned it, "Witnessing the absolute immensity of the earth and sky, I realize my own utter insignificance. My only wish is for world peace." She had no idea that back in New York, the sudden ping of her brief online activity caused Thaddeus to stay awake the entire night, staring at his phone, weeping silently. In a lifetime of 80 years, some people remain permanently frozen in the exact moment of their farewell. 2 years later, Ainsley Sterling finally returned to New York City. She had been personally invited by the mayor of New York to headline a massive summit for young American innovators at the Javits Center. In her VIP dressing room, Blythe was meticulously reviewing the day's itinerary with Ainsley. A high-end stylist rushed in, carrying garment bags. A celebrity makeup artist was delicately applying a flawless, invisible base. "Miss Sterling, your skin is so spectacular you barely even need foundation. You're so radiant I actually have to tone you down a bit for the stage lights," the makeup artist gushed, applying the final touches and gesturing to the vanity mirror. Hearing this, Ainsley looked at her own reflection. For a moment she was stunned. The face staring back at her was entirely different from the woman she was 10 years ago or even 3 years ago, or rather her aura, the predatory sharpness in her eyes. She had evolved into a titan exactly like her father. "Ainsley, you did it. You survived." In her daze, Ainsley hallucinated her parents, standing proudly behind her, looking at her with overwhelming love. This vanity mirror felt like magic. Ainsley's eyes instantly welled with unshed tears. Suddenly, a loud, violent commotion erupted in the hallway outside. "Wow, look who we dragged in. Isn't this the infamous Black Widow of Manhattan, Serena Croft?" A shrill voice mocked loudly. "How the hell did you con your way into a gig as a makeup assistant? Who were you planning to scam today? Does the VIP know you're a professional gold digger with a rap sheet? I bet you didn't dare mention it. If they knew, they'd think you're a bad omen. Don't you disgust yourself." The VIP dressing rooms were not soundproof. Ainsley heard every single vicious word clearly. She frowned slightly. "Serena Croft. Blythe, go check if that's the Serena Croft we know." Ainsley was unaware that Serena had become a national pariah years ago. She genuinely thought she had misheard, or it was just an unfortunate girl with the same name. New York City is massive. How could the arrogant Serena Croft be reduced to a bullied makeup assistant? 2 minutes later, Blythe returned. She was aggressively hauling a woman behind her. Ainsley turned around confused. Before Blythe could brief her, the trembling woman stepped forward. Ainsley felt a jolt of recognition at her horribly raspy voice. "Ainsley Sterling, you're back in New York." Ainsley locked eyes with her. It was Serena Croft without a doubt. But the Serena standing before her possessed not a single trace of the radiant, arrogant high school sweetheart. She wore a cheap surgical mask, and her exposed eyes looked dead, cloudy, and hollow. Her body, once famously curvy, was now so skeletal she was virtually unrecognizable. The generic jeans she wore were frayed to shreds, the color completely washed out. "Miss Sterling has returned to keynote the Innovators Summit. We just dragged you out of a mob, so do not try anything stupid," Blythe warned, stepping firmly between Serena and Ainsley, her eyes radiating lethal caution. Serena replied with a pathetic, agonizingly bitter laugh. "Look at me now. What possible threat could I be to her? So why are you acting like this?" Ainsley signaled Blythe to step aside with a slight shake of her head. Serena struggled to speak, especially in front of Ainsley, the woman she had tried to destroy. Thankfully, Ainsley didn't press her. It was neither the time nor the place to drag up ancient history. And truthfully, between her and Serena, there was absolutely nothing worth remembering. "Wait in my dressing room until the hallway clears out," Ainsley said, grabbing her Birkin bag and offering a faint, indifferent smile. Even though Serena had maliciously infiltrated her marriage to Thaddeus, Ainsley had no desire to kick a drowning dog. It wasn't that Ainsley was a saint. The catastrophic failure of her marriage wasn't solely the fault of one manipulative woman, and all that horrific history was dead and buried. Serena's current emaciated state proved that karma had already exacted a brutal toll. Ainsley simply didn't want to inflict further damage on this pathetic, broken woman. "Thank you." Ainsley heard Serena whisper brokenly before she stepped out of the dressing room. However, an hour after her keynote speech, Ainsley received a call from the NYPD's Midtown North Precinct. "Miss Sterling, regarding the grand larceny accusations filed against a Miss Serena Croft, we need you to come down to the precinct to provide a statement." Ainsley was completely baffled. She immediately cross-checked with Blythe, the stylist team, and the jewelry sponsors. Absolutely nothing was missing from her VIP suite. Several event staffers called 911. They claimed they witnessed Miss Croft rummaging through designer bags in your private dressing room. And since Miss Croft has a highly publicized criminal record for fraud and theft, we brought her in for severe questioning. "Even if you aren't missing anything, we need you to come down," the detective insisted. Ainsley had no idea Serena had a criminal record. On the ride to the precinct, Blythe briefed her in detail on Serena's horrific downfall over the past 3 years. That year, Serena had been brutally exposed online as a serial scam artist. Every single wealthy man she had ever conned banded together to legally destroy her, claiming she had manipulated them and filed massive civil suits demanding the return of all assets. Serena was expelled, her degrees revoked, and she was blacklisted from the fashion and design industries permanently. She later posted a tearful public apology and surrendered all her ill-gotten luxury goods to settle the lawsuits, but the internet refused to show mercy. If a powerful man makes a mistake, he can shed a few tears on national television and be forgiven. But if a woman makes a mistake, even if she repents and pays her dues, she is permanently nailed to a cross and flagellated for the rest of her life. Serena had lived in absolute squalor for the past 2 years. She bounced between shady cash-in-hand jobs, essentially homeless. Shoplifting for food became a desperate survival tactic. Later, she allegedly tried to go straight, eventually begging for this degrading gig as a makeup assistant. And now, because of a false accusation, she was going to lose this job too. Ainsley arrived at the precinct and paid Serena's exorbitant bail without a second thought. It was early spring. The New York wind still carried a vicious, biting chill. Ainsley draped her own $4,000 cashmere coat over Serena's trembling skeletal shoulders. "I know you didn't steal anything," Ainsley said quietly. Blythe had immediately handed the Javits Center's security footage over to the detectives, which clearly proved Serena was only frantically searching for a bottle of water in the corner. "If you're willing to accept it, I'll have Blythe secure you a quiet, normal job in a city where no one knows your face, just as a transition. Once you get back on your feet, you can build a new life for yourself." Ainsley pulled out a silk handkerchief and gently wiped the endless stream of tears streaming down Serena's ruined face. "How does that sound? Why are you helping me?" Serena sobbed hysterically. "I'm not helping you. If I hadn't told you to wait in my dressing room, you never would have been dragged to a police precinct, Ainsley stated with absolute factual precision. Serena laughed through her agonizing tears. Thank you. Ainsley shook her head and instructed Blythe to take Serena away to handle the legal fallout. As Serena was being guided to a separate SUV, she suddenly broke away and ran back toward Ainsley. She bowed deeply at a perfect 90-degree angle to the woman she had once mocked. With bloodshot, swollen eyes, she screamed over the traffic, "I am so sorry for what I did to you back then." Ainsley had never expected that after all these years. She would hear a genuine "I'm sorry" tear itself from Serena's throat. But she couldn't bring herself to say, "It's okay." After all, the psychological trauma she endured back then was violently real and nearly destroyed her. Ainsley could only look at Serena and say, "Live a good life, Serena, and never betray yourself again." Before Serena could process the words, the tinted window of the Maybach rolled up smoothly, and the car vanished into the endless, sprawling New York night. After that night, Serena Croft disappeared, and Ainsley never saw her again. The Tribeca penthouse. This was the sanctuary Ainsley and Thaddeus had once shared. During her years building an empire in Seattle and abroad, Blythe had hired a private service to maintain the property. Therefore, everything before Ainsley's eyes was exactly as she had left it the day she walked out on her marriage. Ainsley sat by the massive floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. Next to her was an open bottle of vintage Perrier-Jouet champagne. The glittering skyline of Manhattan was still intoxicatingly beautiful, but she no longer felt the same suffocating melancholy. Over the past 3 years, Ainsley had accepted advances from several incredible men and engaged in a few relationships both long and short. But every single time she was the one to pull the plug first. It was as if after incinerating her soul to love Thaddeus with everything she had, she was biologically incapable of loving anyone else with that same terrifying intensity. It was unfair to the men who tried. Because of that, Ainsley rarely dipped her toes into romance anymore. Living alone, answering to no one was absolute unadulterated freedom, wasn't it? Meanwhile, deep in the West Village brownstone, Thaddeus's scarred fingers lightly tapped the glass of the massive custom aquarium. Inside, the 2 original butterfly fish still swam in perfect unison. These were the exact fish Ainsley had bought that day at the aquarium. Butterfly fish can live up to 10 years, making them a remarkably resilient species. We sincerely thank Miss Sterling for everything she has done for the American tech sector and for her massive philanthropic efforts nationwide. She is a shining example for us all. For days, the local news networks had been looping clips of Ainsley's keynote at the summit. Thaddeus knew she was back in New York, but he didn't dare seek her out. For nearly 3 years, he had undergone grueling psychiatric therapy for his complex PTSD, mysophobia, and OCD. He had eventually clawed his way back into an operating room at a public hospital in the Bronx, starting over from the absolute bottom as a standard attending physician. His bedside manner was still chillingly cold and silent, which garnered him frequent complaints from hospital administration. But his surgical genius was so unparalleled that he routinely received tearful plaques of gratitude and desperate letters of thanks from patients whose lives he had saved. The miracles he performed vastly outweighed his abrasive personality. However, Thaddeus was incapable of loving anyone else. The void in his heart as the years bled by was only increasingly saturated with Ainsley. It was filled to the absolute brim, to the point where it could never be anyone but her. Except, Ainsley would never ever need him to be her only one again. That night, under the same New York sky, one person slept a deep, dreamless sleep while the other tossed and turned in a waking nightmare. The next day, at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, it was the anniversary of Ainsley's father's passing. Ainsley brought a rare bottle of imported Canadian ice wine to his grand marble headstone. Just as she was uncorking it, Thaddeus appeared from the fog, carrying a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir and a massive bouquet of pure white daisies. "So it's been you all these years," Ainsley said. She wasn't overly surprised. Blythe had run surveillance. Every single year, Ainsley had flown back to honor her father. There was already an expensive bottle of wine and fresh flowers waiting at the grave before she arrived. "I'm sorry. I swear I didn't intend to run into you." Thaddeus's immediate reaction was to desperately apologize. He looked panicked. He had completely forgotten that if Ainsley was in New York, she would absolutely come to visit her father's grave in person. He was terrified Ainsley would think he was stalking her. Since when had the arrogant, untouchable Dr. Vance become so crippled by anxiety, so consumed by self-loathing, so hypersensitive to her every reaction? Ainsley was momentarily taken aback. "I didn't think you did," she said softly. "Thank you for looking after him these past few years." She bit her lip and offered a genuine, gentle tone. No, you don't have to thank me." Thaddeus actually stuttered, his eyes darting to the grass. Ainsley poured the ice wine onto the earth in front of the headstone and broke the silence. How have you been these past few years? The last time they had accidentally met in front of her father's grave was over 3 years ago. 3 years ago, they were still legally husband and wife. Today, 3 years later, they couldn't even be classified as distant friends. I've been doing well. Thaddeus lied softly. And you, I've been doing exceptionally well. Ainsley smiled brilliantly. Thaddeus, are you moving forward? At this question, Thaddeus's jaw tightened. He couldn't answer. He couldn't lie and say he had forgotten her. Fortunately, Ainsley didn't need him to answer. Thaddeus, I'm flying back to Seattle tomorrow. I have no idea when I'll be back in New York next. I wanted to tell you. I haven't completely forgotten you either. I haven't entirely erased you from my memory. She looked at him with absolute terrifying calmness. But my stance remains exactly the same as it was that day on the terrace. There is zero possibility between us. I know, Thaddeus replied, his voice a broken whisper. Just being able to see you today. It's enough to keep me alive. I don't dare ask for anything more. Good. Then you leave first. Ainsley knew this was unspeakably cruel, but she had to be the one to sever the cord. She couldn't let this toxic cycle continue. Both she and Thaddeus had to keep walking forward. They could not remain frozen here among the dead. Let's not see each other again, Thaddeus. Ainsley. Let's not see each other again.